CD4.
Chapter 9. He misses driving. Not like he does with the dump trucks at the mines. Back in Sydney, he's at the mercy of public transport and other people's timetables, when all he wants to do is get in a car and see Toto. Maybe her as well, to have the freedom of taking them places. But if he thinks of driving, it'll remind him of the car and those never-ending highways up north, the temptations they presented. Rosie's coming out of the house with the pram and he walks up, and he helps her down the step. "Just got in," he says, although she hasn't asked. Toto gives him a tired smile, and Jimmy figures he just woke up. It's like I can't stop thinking of him, you know? And it's freaking me out because every other week I feel forgotten, as if I have to start all over again. I'm worried that he won't remember me. It's blurted, but he has to get it out. The problem with being away is that it means Jimmy spends too much time in his head and all sorts of things happen in there. He's suddenly aware of someone else on the veranda. "My nonna Eugenia is here from Sicily," Rosie tells him. He expected a small woman with hair set immaculately, like both of Frankie's nonnas, or even Mackie's nana Grace. They could be described as stern or haughty, but warm. Rosie's grandmother has a hardness in her eyes that makes him flinch. "She doesn't like me," he says to Rosie, when Eugenia relinquishes a pram to stop for a ciggy outside the community centre. Does she have to? Jimmy was hoping she'd contradict him. Her father was a good-for-nothing, she was married to a good-for-nothing, her neighbours a good-for-nothing, so as far as she's concerned, men don't rate. "What about her son?" he asks. "She would have loved your father, right?" Jimmy doesn't know why he says that, because it's not as if he's top priority when it comes to his mother. "Son-in-law," she says, "and my father was in a class of his own." A car races around the corner of Ramsey and Dalhousie and almost mounts the curb where they're walking. Jimmy grabs Rosie's hand and pulls her back. He doesn't even try to wrest Toto from Eugenia. A fortnight ago, he convinced Rosie to share the pram, and now her grandmother comes along and she's not in on the agreement. They spend the next half hour walking the 2 blocks of the main drag. Here, there seems to be a place for every deli item. The shop to buy cheese, the one to buy fresh pasta, the fruit shop, the delicatessen for pickled vegetables, and then the IGA, where they get a ticket and wait 20 minutes just so Rosie can buy 100 grams of salami. For the life of him, Jimmy can't understand why she doesn't get her groceries all in the one place. Finally, they wait in a queue outside the hole-in-the-wall bakery, another one of those family-owned businesses with more charm than sparkle, selling a variety of stone-baked Italian breads and pizza loaves and cakes. Nothing like the flashier pasticceria up the road. When Rosie's paid up, the woman behind the counter gives her a free bread roll for Toto to gnaw at. They head back home and Jimmy notices she gets a couple of text messages. "Are you going out with someone?" he asks. She shrugs. "Maybe. I haven't decided yet." "Has he met Toto?" "Yes." After a moment, she glances at him. "What about you?" "Nothing serious." "I'd hate to be described that way. Nothing serious." The girl he's seeing does the accounts for the mines, and he can't imagine her losing sleep because she's nothing serious to him. Jimmy is probably less than nothing serious to her. Rosie eyes him and then looks at her grandmother. "Do you want to take him for the afternoon?" she asks. He'd never pick Rosie for someone who doesn't make her own decisions, but Eugenia's definitely in charge here. "Are you okay with that?" he asks. "Because I want it to come from you, Rosie. I want to know that you trust me with him. It's what you and I need between us. I don't want to be tiptoeing 24/7. "If I wasn't okay with it, you wouldn't be taking him," Rosie says. Eugenia says something to her and Rosie nods in agreement. "What did she say?" "I'm not a translator," she says, irritated. "I don't want to be second-guessing what your grandmother's saying about me." "You talk too much." That's what she's saying. Outside the house, Rosie crouches down and kisses Toto. 2 rules. Keep him warm and don't swear in front of him. He's about a second away from saying his first words and I don't want them to be "fuck you." Fair enough? And don't get excited if he says dada. It's not exactly a first word. It's more of a tongue placement behind his teeth thing. Won't get excited. He doesn't mean for it to come out the way it does. She glances up at him and something softens in her eyes. It's just that when he says it for real, you want it to mean something more than baby sounds. Jimmy sends a gang a message, telling them he has Toto for the afternoon. He asks whether they want to catch up, even though he knows they're either working or in lectures. Frankie and Mackie take less than a minute to respond, and according to Mackie, Tara says she's chucking a sickie for the afternoon and orders them not to leave until she gets there. The pram's a shocker, flat in one wheel and lopsided. Jimmy stops at a servo to pump it up, but it's more of a puncture than a flat. It must wipe Rosie out going uphill. He takes Toto on a bus down Parramatta Road and gets out at Camperdown, where he's to meet Frankie and Mackie outside Deus Ex Machina motorbike shop. Mackie's already there, waiting. He crouches beside the pram and peers in. "Hey, Totes," he says. "No swearing in front of him, okay?" Jimmy takes Toto out of the pram and places him on the ground while he tries to fix a wheel for the 10th time. Mackie grips Toto's hand and looks up at Jimmy. "You never let go, mate. Never." Frankie arrives and she gets eye level with Toto. Jimmy sees tears well up in her eyes. "I can't believe we've started breeding," she says, picking Toto up. "He's made us old," Mackie laughs. "You're the one wearing a tie and talking shares in the stock market." "Guys!" They watch as Tara, weighed down by a satchel and briefcase, waves at them from the middle of Parramatta Road. She's perched on the thin medium strip with cars racing past her both ways. "Use the lights," Mackie shouts. She ignores him and races across the road the moment she gets a chance. "Oh my God, he's gorgeous!" She shoves all her stuff onto Mackie and holds out her hands to Toto. "I dislocated my shoulder last month and you didn't take time off work," Tom accuses her. "I gave you a sponge bath for a week," she says. "Be grateful." Toto goes to her, solemn at first, and then he laughs. "Fuck, it's Hayla in year 11 detention," Mackie says. "What did I say about swearing?" "Justine wants to Skype with us from fucking Melbourne," Frankie says, taking out her phone. In true Justine fashion, she cries when they hold Toto up to the screen. Jimmy hasn't seen her in years, but it feels like less. She'd have to be one of the most generous people he's ever known. At school, if he wanted moments away from Frankie's dramas, or lectures from Tara, or descriptions of Siobhan's sex life, there'd be Justine in the music room. Today, she's rehearsing for a gig and plays Toto a piece of crazy music on the piano accordion, and Toto loves it. Tara has a bit of a sway with him while Frankie sings an Italian song until Mackie tells them to hang up or he'll walk away. Inside the cafe, Mackie tries to fold up the pram. "In what century did you buy this thing?" he says, while Tara grabs the first waitress they see. "We need a high chair," as if Toto's the first baby to ever enter the joint. And it's all manic and sort of emotional. When they're settled, Jimmy looks at the menu, wishing there was something that suggested what to feed a 17-month-old. "Do you think he can have French fries?" "Of course," Mackie says. "I took my cousin Billy to Macca's when he was about 1. Frankie is studying Toto. "You're pretty adorable," she tells him. "Very Italian looking." "So why did she name him after my dad's favourite band?" Mackie asks. Jimmy shrugs. "I reckon she named him after Toto Cutugno. He's an Italian icon," Frankie says. She breaks out into one of his songs. "I think it's a family name. Toto comes from Salvatore," Frankie explains to the others. "Sounds nothing like it," Mackie says, taking off his tie. Tara leans into him. "How was the interview?" He shrugs. "Pretty ordinary." Despite still getting casual work, Jimmy can tell Mackie is getting frustrated with the finding a real job process. Frankie brings up her project and Tara's impressed that she's presenting 2 papers at a symposium. It makes Jimmy feel guilty that he hasn't asked what she's studying. "Family history," she explains. "There's so much information around for people whose families migrated from the UK and Ireland," Frankie tells him. "But not that much for everyone else." "I didn't know you were interested," Mackie says. "Accidentally to begin with," she says. As part of my degree, I did a genealogy elective, and this one night a friend of my parents was over for dinner talking about how his parents died without them having written anything down about their migration or history. So I started doing research for him, wrote to libraries and organisations all over Italy, managed to find records 6 generations back, and then I put it into a booklet for his family. They were weeping. She looks at them nodding. Anyway, they wanted to pay me. I said no. They said yes. I said no. My mother said, "You're not living with us forever, so take the money." Jimmy can imagine me saying that. "How much did you charge?" Tara asks. "It was about 20 hours work, so I charged $30 an hour." "Not enough," Mackie says. "You've got a master's." "I'm working on at least half a dozen at the moment. All word of mouth. But the best part is that I decided to write an article for an online magazine about migration since the 1920s. It sort of focuses on reasons and experiences and how they've changed depending on what decade they arrived." "I want to read it," Tara says. "I really wanted to go into what we can learn when it comes to refugees arriving here today." "Drum roll, please." "Aren't you loud enough?" Mackie says. "Last week," she says, ignoring him, "I got an offer from ANU to do my PhD on the topic." "Jealous?" Tara says. "Very jealous. You're a bloody superstar." "No swearing," Jimmy pleads. Tara sends a wistful glance at Tom. "Should I do a PhD?" "No, earn money, woman." "When did everything become about earning money?" Jimmy asks. "She wants a couple of those," Tom says, pointing to the baby. "He wants a couple of them as well," Tara says. "But we're not fornicating for the purpose of procreation until we can afford to live on a single income," Mackie explains. Tara's fingers creep up Toto's hand and he chuckles. "I never pegged you as clucky," Jimmy says. "What a ridiculous word that is," Frankie says. "Archaic," Tara agrees. "Every time I hug one of my baby cousins or godchildren, the relatives are all, 'Oh my God, she's next. She's so clucky.' And I'm like, it's a hug, people." "So no babies for now," Mackie says. He gently pokes Toto on the chest. "You, number 1 son, Toto." "You have to get the pronunciation right," Jimmy says. Mackie takes out his phone. "I'm Googling how to pronounce Toto in Italian." Toto's amused by their laughter. Jimmy is moved by it. These guys always came up with the goods. Great families to be part of, beds to sleep on, food on the table every time he was in their homes. But Toto's the first thing Jimmy's had to offer, and is overcome by what it means to him. Upstairs at Rosie's place, Toto does that bucking thing he always does when he sees his mother. She's got eye makeup on and looks hot. And it means she's going out with the guy who's met Toto, and Jimmy figures he doesn't have the right to feel jealous. They don't have memories or history. Jimmy didn't get a girlfriend pregnant. He got a stranger he had known for 2 weeks pregnant. It's as bloodless as it can possibly be. Rosie looks up, and it's only her grandmother being there that makes him head downstairs. "I've got an interview this week," Rosie calls after him. "At a nursing home in Chiswick. Eugenia can look after him from now if I get it, but I need to work something out for when she leaves." "What are the options?" "Occasional daycare," she shrugs. "And Signora across the road might agree to do it. She used to babysit me." He comes back up the stairs because he thinks any progress with Rosie is important. "I'll pay for any childcare while I'm not in Sydney, but when I'm here, I really want to look after him." She doesn't look impressed. "You can't go around promising things and then not delivering." "Who says I won't be delivering, Rosie?" "I rang your number for a year. I couldn't. I don't give a shit. Where you left your phone, Jimmy. You didn't deliver." Not that much progress after all. "Enjoy your date," he mutters, walking away. Frankie takes him to drinks at the Old Clare, celebrating an engagement of a couple of her friends. The place is packed and she's waved over by a group of mostly guys, all of them pissed. "Will's friends from uni," she says, introducing them. "Jimmy." The taller of the guys feigns a sob. "Your friends too, Francesca." She laughs, and Jimmy can tell she likes these people. And they've just come back from the big drunken tour of Europe and saw him in Germany. "Stuttgart!" the guys holler to each other. as if it's a trigger word for another swig of beer. "We had so much fun," the only girl says. Erin is her name, he thinks. They bring up the pipeline project Will's working on, and Frankie nods a lot and Jimmy can't understand a word they're saying. Another guy joins them, holding 2 beers and sipping from both. So pissed he can hardly string a sentence together. He ogles Frankie until one of the guys introduces her as Will's +1. Jimmy sees a flash of irritation cross her face. "Will told us you're back at uni," Erin says to her. "Doing what? Top-up courses?" Before Frankie has a chance to respond, she says, "You're a crazy girl not wanting to spend a year in Europe." Erin nudges a tall guy. "The moment this one gets a job overseas, I'm following him over." "Who says you're invited?" the boyfriend says with a laugh. "As if I'd trust you on your own, babe." She looks at Frankie, waves away what she just said, coming up close. "Will and I had a D&M about you. He can't understand why you're not with him." "Did the dickhead stop asking you to marry him, Francesca?" one of the guys asks. "Is that why you're not over there?" "I'll marry you," the drunk says. The space invasion is full on and Frankie steps away from the intensity of the group. "See you guys later." Jimmy follows her as they push towards a couple getting engaged. Along the way, friends recognise her and there's a whole lot of, "How's Will? Where's Will? Why aren't you with Will?" They stay a while and Jimmy gets talking to a couple of their friends whom he's met before. It feels good to talk about work. Engineers understand mines and Jimmy doesn't have to apologise about what he does. Outside, when they leave, Frankie's quiet. Not unhappy, but he knows something's not right. It's crowded on Broadway tonight, and they don't have much luck getting on a bus. "Let's walk," she says, although it'll take them about 40 minutes, especially in the heels Frankie's wearing. "And just for the record, I'm no one's +1, she says out of the blue. "Good to hear." "Because that's what I am to some people, Will's hot girlfriend. While they're speaking pipelines and formulas, no one truly asks what I do. Just, 'Oh, you're in the band,' or 'You make bridal wear, how lovely.' And then it's back to pipelines and infrastructure, and aren't I lucky because Will's going to be able to pick and choose who to work for one day, and Will would be a fool not to take up an offer in Europe this year because Will's got a future more important than mine, and I'd be a crazy girl not to go to Europe because everyone wants to spend a year hanging out in Germany as their boyfriend's +1. For the record, you're not that hot." She grins because she can't help herself. Jimmy doesn't know how else to respond. Has to admit that he has always had a sort of reverence for the rise and rise of Will because it's mostly due to pretty intense hard work and intelligence. Frankie's phone rings and Jimmy figures it's the aforementioned at this time of night. She looks at the screen, shows him. "Stuttgart!" she hollers, and Jimmy laughs because she's spot on with the drunk impersonation. She answers the phone and walks ahead of him. Rosie lets him take Toto for a couple of hours every day. Same instructions. No swearing, keep him warm. Jimmy is to ring her the moment Toto says his first words. On Friday, he heads back to Mackie and Tyra's place. Mackie hasn't got any casual work today and is in front of the computer screen browsing Seek. "The paramedics are advertising for interns," Mackie tells Jimmy, handing over some information he's downloaded and taking Toto from him. Both he and Tyra have collected toys that Mackie retrieves from a basket in the corner. "First thing you have to do online is prove you're eligible, send in a resume and 2 referees." Jimmy reads the info pack. Once they clear his eligibility, he's to do an online aptitude test and then wait to see if he's made the next round. There are plenty of rounds, too many. He wants this more than anything, but can't help noticing the opening salary for a trainee. At least 30,000 less than what he's earning in the mines. He wouldn't have cared a couple of months ago, but he's just told Rosie that he wants to pay for daycare and everything else. He doesn't know what he'll be able to afford if he settles in Sydney, pays rent, and tries to support a kid. Later, while Jimmy is playing with Toto, Mackie types up his resume. "This Kev guy should be your referee," he tells Jimmy. "Did you get to know him well?" "I stayed for a couple of months after the floods, helped with the cleanup. I haven't been in contact because I'm pretty slack that way, but I can't imagine him not vouching for me." "My dad can be your character reference," Mackie says. Jimmy doesn't know when Mackie got so responsible. but the application and supporting stuff is done within the hour. They head over to Mackie's Aunt Georgie's place to spend the afternoon at the park across the road with Toto and Georgie's 4-year-old Billy. Mackie's sister, Annabelle, pops over because she lives around the corner. Today she's sporting a Princess Leia hairdo and has her trumpet. Year 12 music exam trials are on soon and she's practicing 24/7. While she grabs an orange and cuts it into quarters, she nudges Jimmy. "So you got a girl pregnant?" Jimmy can't help laughing. There was never any beating around the bush when it came to Annabelle. Her phone buzzes and she grabs it before her brother does. It's from her girlfriend. Mackie is making kissing sounds. "Grow up," she says, sticking a quarter of the orange in her mouth and giving Billy and Toto an orange peel twisted smile. Billy thinks it's funny and Toto is in awe of them both. Annabelle grabs her trumpet and her phone and does a dramatic prance around the park playing a marching tune while Billy follows. "Did Tommy tell you about the pram?" Georgie asks Jimmy. "We all put in to buy Georgie a pram when Billy was born," Mackie says, "because she was this geriatric mother who couldn't even walk to the station without a whinge, and now it's collecting cobwebs in the garden shed." "It's yours on loan until someone in the family needs it again," Georgie says. Jimmy goes to shake his head. "Take it," Mackie says. "It's worth more than her car." Georgie laughs. "Sadly true." Jimmy embraces her. "Mate, too generous." Auntie Margie Finch still goes on about that lovely friend of Tommy's who came out to Walgett to help build the community centre back in 2007, she says, referring to Mackie's great aunt, who's a nun. Jimmy can't hide the grimace. "I was a bit lost back then. Weren't we all?" Georgie's pram is a breeze, and Jimmy almost breaks into a jog with it. Toto sits up holding tight to the bar and staring out at the world. He drops a new toy that came with the pram and starts crying. Jimmy picks it up and crouches, looking into his caramel eyes. "I'm Jimmy," he whispers, "and you're the first thing I've ever sort of owned, and I don't want to get this wrong." Toto has a ghost of a smile on his face, a knowing one. Of course Jimmy's going to get it wrong. It's how he ended up in detention all his school life, and on a good behaviour bond for 2 years. It's how he lost to Monaro. Rosie's sitting on the front doorstep, waiting when they get home. She isn't impressed with the pram. "I'm going to have to give them money," she says, trying to take Toto out, frustrated with the shoulder straps. "No, it's on loan. But I have to give them something." Jimmy takes over with the straps and lifts Toto out, handing him to her. "They won't accept anything," he says. "I don't like owing people." "You owe them nothing, Rosie. Maybe a thank you note and leave it at that." "I want you to return it," she says. Jimmy doesn't want to insult Georgie and the Mackies, and he can't think of any reason why they need to. He pushes a pram back to the front gate. "Come on." "Where?" she asks. He takes Toto from her and puts him back into the pram. "Uphill." 10 minutes up Waratah Street and Rosie's changed her mind. "It's like the V8 of prams," she says. "A Holden, twin throttle, 5.0 litre. Nah, it's a Ford Barra 4.0 litre 6-cylinder. She's trying not to smile, but then she does. He hasn't seen much of a happy Rosie. Even Toto seems to respond with a chuckle of his own. Jimmy does an elaborate show of how he can spin the pram around effortlessly and they head home. "How come you know your V8s?" he asks. "I was the son my father never had." He glances at her. "What would he have done about a stolen Monaro?" "He would have hunted the thief down. My mum was a proud owner of one." "The Fiat is shit." Jimmy figures Rosie's impersonating her mum. There's a bittersweet smile on her face. Go figure, she loved an Aussie car. "Did you ever watch the V8s?" he asks. "Too expensive. You?" He nods. "The Gold Coast, Ipswich, Townsville. I'd love to watch the race on Phillip Island," she says. "I'll take you there one day." The words come out before he can stop himself, but they don't seem to bother her. "Where's your nan?" he asks. "Eugenia's not a nan," she says, but she smiles and He can't stop looking at her. You want to get something to eat? He asks. She shakes her head. I want to take Eugenia to the cemetery. I can stay and look after Toto, he asks, if you don't mind me hanging out at the house. She thinks for a moment and shrugs, nods. Jimmy's in the kitchen with Toto when Martha arrives home. He helps her with the groceries while Toto's in the mini-mover ramming into walls. Martha puts on the jug just as the home phone rings, but she ignores it and the answering machine clicks on. Martha, pick up the phone. Jimmy sits at the butcher's trolley expecting Martha to pick up, but she makes herself comfortable opposite him. Whoever it is sounds pissed off, he says. He checks himself too late, looks over at Toto and hopes his first words aren't pissed off. You won't remember this because you're too young, Martha says, but there was a time in life where you could go an entire day without speaking to anyone on the phone, and it was liberating and very unstressful, and you didn't get phone calls such as, Hi, it's me, I'm on the bus, or Hi, it's me, I'm buying the milk. I mean, who gives a rat's ass? Jimmy points to Toto. No swearing. He's just about to say his first words and it's freaking me out because I think it's going to be something pretty awful on my watch. They look down at Toto, who's smashing into the sideboard with his car. The porcelain figurines on top of it are shaking, as if they sense life is no longer safe. Martha gets up and approaches him, crouches at eye level. Listen, Seb Gennaro, you've got to stop ruining my furniture. Do you have a photo of him? Jimmy asks, because he's keen to see this resemblance. Seb? Of course I do. But what about Rosie's photos? He shrugs. She says they're in storage, but I think there's more to it. The phone rings again and the machine switches on. There's another, Where are you, Martha? Which she ignores again. I'll get you a photo, she says at the same time as Toto shouts out. Martha stops, looks at Jimmy. Did he just say what I thought he said? Jimmy asks. They wait and watch. A one-off, Martha reassures him. Jimmy isn't so convinced. She'll kill me. On cue, the front door opens and Jimmy hears Rosie and Eugenia's voice. Toto sets off on his walker in the direction of his mum's voice, chuffed with himself. Mata, mata, mata. Chapter 10. Rosie would have preferred Toto's first word to be fuck you. Worse still, he's turned Martha into Marta, and what she is, at the end of the day, is a thief. Because of her, there's no trace of Rosie's mum in the house. At least she can sneak into Martha's room and stare at the photo of her father on the mantelpiece, marvelling at how much Toto looks like him. But her mother's disappeared, and Rosie's frightened that she's forgetting what she looked like. Eugenia being here made the yearning worse, because there's a tease of resemblance. Once or twice, while they lie in bed together, she reaches out to touch the parts of Eugenia's face that remind Rosie of her mum. But her nonna isn't much for physical affection and pushes her hand away with irritation. Smettila, Rosanna. But Rosie doesn't want to stop. So she goes searching for fragments of Loredana. There are reminders in the neighbourhood. Some people know where to get the best panna di casa or arancini. Rosie knows where to find women who speak the dialect. She can't go overboard because she's on a budget. So it's 100 grams of prosciutto from La Monica IGA, a tub of fresh ricotta, a passanella, a small container of giardiniera from Zanetti's. There are the terms of endearment she waits to hear. Bella, Goya, tesoro. Words that cocooned Rosie's childhood, missing ever since her mum died. When she's not stalking Sicilian-speaking women on Ramsay Street, she goes for more job interviews and is offered a couple of shifts at the nursing home down in Chiswick. But she can't provide 100 points of identification because her driver's licence has expired and her name's not on a utility bill or council rates. She doesn't have a credit card. Her Medicare card only gets her 25 points, and she's got an ID card for her pension that's worth 40. But to reach 100, she needs her passport, her birth certificate, which means that Luke, the C-bomb, has to come back into her life after dumping her in Queensland 2 years ago. He doesn't just have her legal documents, but her mother's wedding dress and all her photos, packed away in 2 suitcases sitting in his shed in Maroubra. Rosie left them there before they headed up north because she didn't want anything she loved under Martha's roof. Luke's changed his number and she manages to track down one of the guys they met in Coffs Harbour who gives her a more current one. "It's Rosie," she says. "How did you get this number?" "I want my stuff, Luke." "Then come and get it." "I don't have a car." "Not my problem." "Then tell me when you're home." Lachlan rings, and it's good to contrast guys. She's hung out with him since Eugenia's arrival, and it makes her feel normal, like other people her age who get to hang out and laugh and not give a shit about anything but exams. It feels good knowing she can attract guys with decent histories. He still lives at home, in the sort of family that has dinner together at 6 p.m, with a mum who calls out, "Lachlan, set the table," every time Rosie's there. His family asks about the baby without an inch of judgment, and Rosie laughs at everyone's attempt to pronounce Toto's name. She tells them that it's not so strange a name in Sicily. Tonight Lachlan wants to veg and watch a movie together in his room, but then changes his mind and suggests they head down to the Rose in case his friends are there. By the time they settled back to watch TV a second time, he's changed his mind again and they head out for a drink. Deep down, she thinks he has a fear of missing out. He introduces her to his friends and they seem decent, all studying economics or law or both. They talk about taking no-dos and speed to keep them awake to study and reassure her that they're not junkies just stressed out about exams. Lachlan seems to interpret her silence as disapproval, and he takes her hand under the table, squeezing it. But it's not disapproval, just indifference. Rosie's been there, done that with drugs, and they don't interest her anymore. They failed to live up to any expectations, and one of her few blessings is that she doesn't have an addictive personality, just a destructive one. Back at his place, they have sex. He's cautious, apologises a couple of times, asks permission. She finds it endearing. Later, when he drives her home, he whistles a tune. She can tell he's happy, and it's because of her. It gives her the courage to ask a favour. "My ex-boyfriend has a suitcase of some really important stuff of mine, and I was wondering if you could drive me there to pick it up." "Is he a psycho?" "No, just a dickhead." "Is he Toto's dad?" She shakes her head. She gets a sense he doesn't want to do it and instantly regrets asking. "Look, don't worry about it," she says. "It's cool." "You sure?" "Yeah, it's all good." The next day she leaves Toto with Eugenia and takes a couple of buses to Maroubra, planning to drag the 2 suitcases back the same way. Out front, Luke's place looks like a hoarder's hovel. A rusty boat trailer, half on its side, a soiled mattress piled high with split garbage bags filled with rubbish that has been put out for collection for what seems like weeks. Filthy bath fittings, mops, rusty hinges. On the front veranda, a collection of muddy runners, another grubby single mattress, rotted, mouldy. Rosie can't begin to imagine what the shed looks like these days, and the idea that it houses her precious belongings fills her with shame. All she wants is to take part of her mother's memory out of this flea-pit dump. She knocks at the front door, but no one answers, and her knocks turn into hammering. With every blow, she feels a rage build up inside of her, until her knuckles begin to bleed. She tries the shed next, finds it padlocked, and there Rosie unleashes a fury that's wound up inside of her since hearing his voice. She's at the splintered timbered door, with 2 fists, screaming with a rage she can't contain, because Rosie is powerless every day, all day. No money, no job, no means of identifying herself, no way of climbing out of a rut. All she has is the house her father built, and now Martha's got real estate agents walking in and out, telling them lies, and it all ends with that unfathomable despair that has chased Rosie for years, that she will never see her mother and father again. Toto's birth was a godsend and a curse. It brought back the memory of everything she lost. Later that day, she picks up Toto and meets Yolanda and Tess and the babies. She doesn't know what she has with these women, but they're at Livy's place every week, and no one's bailed yet. She figures the 2 see each other more than every Tuesday, but she couldn't be bothered begging for more. While the babies sit in the sandpit, she fills them in about the nursing home job, but doesn't tell them the truth, that she can't identify herself. "It's really diverse," she says. "I saw this Asian woman in the garden, and they do a welcome to country at breakfast." "Superficial bullshit," Yolanda says. "That doesn't make a place diverse, Rosie. Honestly, you come across so racist sometimes." "I'm not racist." Tess asks about the uni application, and Rosie regrets ever telling them about it. "I'm not going through with it," she says. "It's in the too hard basket for the time being." "I thought the guy you're dating from the student centre was helping you," Tess says. "I don't want to be that girl who needs help with everything," Rosie says. Not a great way to start a relationship. Yolanda has a teacher's look of disapproval in her eyes. "You are that girl. It's not going to change, so get yourself a profession or you're going to spend the rest of your life making do." "Easy," Tess says to Yolanda. "You need to support Toto," Yolanda says. "Who says I'm not?" Rosie demands. "On a couple of shifts at a nursing home?" "You're not my teacher, Yolanda, so get lost with the lectures." "Guys," Tess says, pointing to the babies. Yolanda's eyes are fixed on Rosie's hands. "What happened?" "Nothing." "Is that Lachlan guy treating you like shit?" "No." "You're upset about something more than Yolanda nagging you," Tess says. "I'm not nagging her." "You're nagging me." Rosie can feel Tess watching her and gives in. Doesn't know where to start. Begins with the fact that she hasn't enough points to ID herself for a job. "What about your license?" Tess asks. "It needs renewing. The cheapest option is $56 for a year, and I won't have that until next Thursday when my pension comes through. And my ex-boyfriend has 2 suitcases of my stuff, including my passport and birth certificate and my photos." "What do you mean he's got your stuff?" Rosie explains, her face smarting from the humiliation of having to reveal that she ever went out with a Luke type. "Not the baby daddy?" Rosie shakes her head. "And I'm not asking him because he'll give me the money and there's just not that much dignity left in the tank." "Have you got enough for rent?" Tess asks, removing a coffee cup her daughter Aurora found in the sand. "I don't pay rent," Rosie says. "Well, there's a positive," Yolanda says, because Rosie's had enough. She grabs her stuff and picks up Toto. "Let me guess, Yolanda, you pay a shitload of rent or a mortgage, so I'm a whinger?" "All I meant, Rosie, is that thank God there's a positive in your life. I can lend—" "Don't," Rosie says, cutting off Tess. "I'll see you whenever." And Rosie figures she won't turn up again. Too much humiliation. At home, Eugenia's working with Martha in the garden. They both notice Rosie as she watches them exchange a look, feels betrayed. Like she did that time her father married Martha 11 months after her mum died. Even more, because Eugenia's not one to be charmed. Yet here she is every day digging up the garden with the enemy. Martha approaches. "Can we talk?" she asks. Rosie can see her eyeing the way Toto's stomping on the flower bed. "What about? The fact that you're selling my house?" Martha walks over to Toto and takes his hand. "Don't touch him. He's eating dirt, Rosie." Rosie grabs Toto from her. "And if you bring another agent through the house, I'll trash it." Martha looks pissed off. Rosie likes the fact that she can still push her buttons. "What are the options, Rosie?" "You move out. That's a great option. This is my house as much as yours, and there's a mortgage, remember?" Rosie walks inside with Toto, but Martha follows her. "Eugenia wants you to have a breast check, Rosie." Rosie feels her pulse going haywire. Even Toto reacts to it, his mouth beginning to quiver. She storms up the stairs, wanting to shut the door on everyone. "Eugenia's asked me to make an appointment for you to see—" "I don't need you to do anything for me, Martha. It's for peace of mind, Rosie. I know how you feel. You and I have nothing in common, so don't say that again." Toto's squirming in her arms because he wants to stay downstairs with the martyr and Eugenia the traitor. "How about mothers with cancer, Rosie? Don't we have that in common?" "Shut up." "You saw them," Martha says, "in the same ward, and they had the same cancer, and they died the same week. How can that not be something in common? Martha has followed her up, and Rosie wants to shove her down the stairs. I'm not bonding with you over dead mothers, Martha. Your father would have wanted you to do this. Since when do you care what my father wanted for me? Rosie shouts at her. Go for the checkup and put your mind at ease. Loredana, stop talking about my mother. Rosie, she'd want you taking care of yourself. Toto's going to— Shut up, shut up, shut up. And Toto's crying and hitting Rosie, and she wants to smash something. And Eugenia's coming up the stairs now, and she's grabbing Toto from Rosie and pushing him into Martha's arms. And then Eugenia's taking Rosie's face between her hands, because Rosie can't stop shouting and crying, because she's forgetting what her mum looked like, and no one has a photo except Luke, the asshole, who won't let her get to her stuff. And then she's yelling because they won't give Toto back to her. Just yelling, I hate you. And then Jimmy's there. Rosie doesn't remember him arriving, but suddenly he's at the top of the stairs. He's SES Jesus from the flood, looking calm as he leans over and takes Toto from Martha, his eyes on Rosie the entire time. I've borrowed a car, he says to her. Do you want to go for a drive? She hasn't sat in the front seat of a car for a long time. Her best memories come from being in her mother's car. She misses the talks and the dialect, always the dialect. Her dad's as well. At home they rarely spoke English. It made Rosie an outsider from the beginning. No preschool, so kindy was a shock. Seb and Loredana hadn't warned her that the rest of the world spoke a different language. It was a tough lesson to learn when she was 5, but there were tougher ones to come. She looks over at Jimmy. He hasn't shut up the whole time, and she can't understand how that's a comfort, but it reminds her of SES Jesus again, because up until now, here in Sydney, something has silenced him. Maybe 2 years of loneliness. He's talking about the paramedics and how he's got to the next phase of an application and how it was Kev who put the idea in his head after the flood, and then he brings up the Monaro. She remembers that he told her back then that the guy who sold it to him had promised it would lead Jimmy to his family. You haven't spoken about your father, she says. How did that work out? It wasn't so bad, he says. He's a sweet guy, but his idea of bonding was punching a couple of cones or getting pissed, and it's pretty much all we did. On a good behaviour bond. On a good behaviour bond, he says with a laugh. So my choices were don't break the law or hang out with my father, who I had just met. She feels for him, because she knew how important it was for him not to stuff up back then, but she also knew he was on that odyssey to find his family. I headed further north, he says, up to the Burdekin, and learnt how to drive a harvester, and then from there I met a couple of guys who had jobs in the mines. He glances at her. But I'd like to see him again, he says. My dad? Does it feel like home? She asks. Here? He thinks and then nods. You? She doesn't know how to answer, but tries. It feels like a very unwelcoming home sometimes, but I don't want to live anywhere else. It's like, go on, he says, when she doesn't finish. But what she wants to say sounds crazy. Go on. Apart from when I was a baby, I never lived anywhere else with my parents, so I'm scared that if I leave, they won't know where to find me if they come back. They drive to Balmain and catch a ferry. On board, Jimmy holds Toto tight, because Toto seems as though he wants to leap into the beauty of it all. When they get off at Circular Quay, the stench from Toto's nappy is gag-worthy. I didn't bring anything with me, she says. Plenty of people with prams, he says, looking around. He approaches a couple with a baby, Toto's age, and starts chatting with them, pointing back to her and Toto. And then he returns with a nappy and some wipes. Too easy. Although it's cold and the sun's going down, they sit on the concourse and look out at the bridge with Toto wrapped up in Jimmy's hoodie. Where was he born? He asks, pressing a kiss to Toto's patted head. Newcastle. How come there? If Lachlan were to ask Rosie the same question, she'd lie. She'd tell him that she liked the people of the city and that it was great being close to the beach. But she doesn't have to impress Jimmy. He's not a potential boyfriend, and he'd pick the lie anyway. I'd run out of money by the time I arrived there, so I got temp work at a nursing home, she says. Then I found out I was pregnant and they let me board. It didn't make sense to go anywhere else. Did you like it? The job? Not really. The nursing home was sort of a miserable place. After Toto was born, I had to move out and I ended up staying in the granny flat of someone related to one of the old people I took care of, so at least something good came out of working there. He holds out a hand to her. Let's walk. They stroll around the concourse as if they are tourists. Once or twice she catches him looking at her and she can't be bothered pretending that he isn't. Toto wants out of the pram, and Jimmy removes him and places him on his shoulders, and Rosie is mesmerised by the sound of her son's joy. While she's lying in bed next to Eugenia that night, Lachlan rings. Wants to know if she'd like to come to a music festival at Moore Park. Rosie says yes, as though she hasn't a single responsibility in the world. Having Eugenia here is a godsend. But it's meant that she's living in two worlds, one with Toto in it and one without. She knows she has to make Toto part of what she has with Lachlan, but Rosie likes pretending that she can have it all. When she switches off the light, her nonna turns to face her. Si innamorata, Eugenia says abruptly. She thinks Rosie's in love. Eugenia may be intuitive, but she's a bit premature on this one. Regardless, the topic of Lachlan is better than cancer, or Martha. So she tells Eugenia about how they met when Lachlan helped her with the uni application, and that when she's with his friends, it feels good to be part of a crowd, and how she envies them for just being able to pick up and head down the coast or go to a music festival in Byron on the spur of the moment, and how he lives at home and is the type to laugh at a text his mum sends him. Rosie can't help thinking that maybe Eugenia is right in what she's sensing. She may not be in love with him now, but she could see herself being one day. She feels Eugenia's stare in the dark. The otro. She means the other one. The phone beeps at 6 a.m. and her hand searches for it in the dark. Can your nonna look after the baby this morning? Yolanda. Rosie sends one back. When? Now. She's confused, wonders if something's wrong with the baby and Yolanda's got no one else to turn to. It feels good to be relied on. Okay, where? I'll pick you up in 10 minutes. Tess is with Yolanda when they pull up in the hatchback. Is everything okay? Rosie asks at Yolanda's window. That arsehole with your stuff would have to be home at this time of the morning, Yolanda says. Where does he live? Rosie's stunned. She's not here to help them, but the other way around. Maroubra. Get in. Take the City West link, Tess says. It's a good guess. If Luke's going to be home at any time, it would be 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning, sleeping off a hangover. He had no concept of having a good night without getting written off. When he opens the door and recognises Rosie, he slams it shut. Yolanda places a nice manicured finger on the doorbell and doesn't let up. They can hear someone shouting, "What the fuck?" from inside, and Rosie figures they've woken up the housemates. Luke opens the door again. "Get your finger off the doorbell," he tells Yolanda. "What? This one?" she asks, holding up her middle finger. He tries to have a stare-off with Yolanda, but he must remind her of every irritating dickhead she's taught because she's unfazed. "Where's the key to the shed?" Rosie asks. "I don't know." "Where is it?" "Are you deaf or stupid, Rosie?" "What's your tone?" Tess says. "Or what?" Tess puts her finger on the doorbell, and there's more yelling from inside. "I don't have the key." "Then it's a good thing we've got bolt cutters in the car," Tess says, removing her finger and walking away. Rosie doesn't know whether she's bluffing, but Tess is heading for the car and Yolanda and Rosie follow. "I'm presuming you don't have bolt cutters," she says to Tess. "Of course I've got bolt cutters. You said the shed was padlocked." Breaking a padlock isn't as simple as it looks in the movies, but the three of them take turns, until finally the lock cracks and Rosie pushes the door forward. Inside there's a rank smell, and she hears Tess making a gagging sound. She searches for the light and there's a sound behind them. Luke's at the shed door with one of his housemates. Rosie doesn't recognise him, but her ex-boyfriend's not the type to hold on to friendships for too long, so it could be a relatively new arrangement. She feels intimidated and doesn't want to look at the others in case they feel the same. "Which are yours?" Tess asks. Rosie points to a couple of grey suitcases with brown trim, a small part of her parents' past. It was the luggage they used when they left Sicily 23 years ago. Obviously not purchased new because they looked like relics. Yolanda and Tess help her drag them out from under a couple of broken heaters and the rusty carcass of a bike. And that's how simple it is in the end. Taking on Luke with the rejects of a mother's group, 80 points, an extra 20 for the Nissan Micra with a car seat. There's a bit of manoeuvring, but they manage to squeeze in the luggage with Rosie in the back. Yolanda starts the ignition, but doesn't drive off just yet. "That first time at Mother's Group, I told my husband that you were a Lebanese girl with attitude," Yolanda says, catching her eye in the mirror. "I thought she was great," Tess says. "You all look the same to me." Rosie starts laughing and doesn't stop until she's crying, clutching onto the side of the suitcase that still has a luggage tag from Palermo Airport written in her mother's handwriting. Tess turns around. "Let's rob a bank next time." That afternoon, she's dancing to Diplo at the Parklife Festival. And in the middle of the crowd when Lachlan says, "I don't know whether I feel like a beer just yet," she looks up at his earnest face and realises the truth. That she can't be with someone who hesitates, who might be able to get top marks for wages, enterprise and land capital, but can't really think on his feet. And she doesn't blame him, because he's decent and lovely and funny, and it makes her sad, because by going out with him, she got a glimpse of what she was missing out on. Except Rosie can't afford those glimpses. She needs to steer clear of them, because they'll force her into mistakes, and having Toto means she can't make as many as Lachlan. Too much collateral damage. In another life, she could wait for Lachlan to grow up and be responsible for something other than setting the table at 6 p.m. or passing an exam. But Rosie needs a functional guy, and when she applies the 100 points of ID to Lachlan, he only gets as far as 40. The altro, the other one. SES Jesus had the advantage of meeting Rosie during a natural disaster and carrying Miss Fricker in his arms through floodwaters, wearing his budgie smugglers. Lachlan never stood a chance, poor bastard. She hands in her paperwork and gets her shifts at the nursing home. It's a beautiful place, with water views and people who seem happy, both those there and those who visit them. Martha's boyfriend, or whatever he is, walks his dad around the grounds. "Hi, Rosie," he says. "Thanks for the recommendation." And Rosie's overwhelmed by the thought that she can influence someone about something so profound in their lives. "I've got to head off soon, Dad," he says, introducing them, and then, "Rosie will take care of you." John Healy's worried. He tells Rosie that he has to pick his kids up from school. "I don't like the look of this weather," he says. Rosie eyes Martha's boyfriend and takes his father's arm. "You know what I reckon, John?" she says, heading back to his room. "Your kids are going to be fine." Chapter 11. Martha owes it to Lloyd Cole. Not that she and Ewan planned to be at his concert together. She's there with Sophie, and he's with Alana, and in the crowd at the foyer at the Enmore, their eyes meet, and that boyish smile is charming the pants off her. "So you're dating your sister's partner, are you?" she asks, buying him a beer at the bar, while Alana and Sophie disappear into the crowd. Because there's always someone they know at these things. He's wearing one of those newsboy caps and pulls off the look 1,000 times better than she would have imagined. Despite the sacking and the marriage breakup and his father's deterioration, Ewan Healy is a man very comfortable in his skin. It's the first time he reminds her of Seb. "Hiding the receding hairline is my forte," he says after she removes his hat and ruffles what's left of his hair. She winks at him. "Not your only one." He leans closer to her. "Really? I'm blushing." "You actually are," she laughs. Alana returns and takes a sip of Ewan's beer. "Why don't you two just come out and put us out of our misery?" she says. They don't respond. It's not that Martha wants to keep it a secret. It's that she doesn't quite know what she's keeping a secret. Apart from the night of Charlie P's funeral, they haven't managed to get anything off the ground. Alana is watching them carefully. Martha can imagine the updates she's preparing for Julia. After the concert, Sophie and Alana go home to their families, leaving her with him. She doesn't know whether it's intentional, but she doesn't question it. There's something endearing about her hand being held as they cross Enmore Road, where they end up having tea and laughing about how many times they would have bumped shoulders at gigs over the years without realising. Lucinda Williams at the State Theatre, the church at the Opera House earlier that year. They worked out that back in 1986 they were at the same Midnight Oil gig at Selena's and John Cougar Mellencamp in 1988 at the Entertainment Centre. Ewan's a bit of a Rain Man when remembering dates and venues. "What's your best gig ever?" he asks. He grabs 2 napkins, hands one over to her. "If we write the same thing, I get lucky tonight," he says. She fishes in her bag for a pen. "Pity, I was thinking you were going to get lucky anyway," she says. "But now it's up to probability." She scribbles hers down and hands it over. There's a strangeness in never once ending up in the back seat of his car in high school. But here she is 30-odd years later, doing the deed in a Hilux for the second time, courtesy of Charlie P's funeral, Martha's dead husband's mother-in-law, and Leonard Cohen's 2008 Sydney concert. She manages to get on top, but needs the grab handle above the window, and when Ewan sits up, they're jammed against the jaw, going at it so fast and hard that she's worried it's going to spring open and they'll end up sprawled naked on some obscure Enmore street. When it's over, they don't move, lying there, sort of entwined in a less than erotic fashion. She traces his face, feels a bristle, and then he's kissing her slowly, and there's this terrible guilt at the thought that if she had ended up with Seb for the rest of her life, she would have missed out on this. And that if she had found this earlier, she'd have missed out on the comfort that only Seb could have given her at the worst time of her life. "My nan needed the Jesus handle to get out of the car," Ewan says to her. "That's what she called it. So it's the first time I've ever thought of her during sex." "If I thought of Oma Bite during sex, I'd be turned off for life," Martha says. He chuckles and makes himself comfortable. For a moment the back seat is illuminated by a car turning into the street. "So what are you going to do with your life beyond this break?" he asks. "I'm trying not to think about it," she says. It's been almost 3 months since she walked out on the job, and Martha knows she has to get used to the idea of returning. "I can't go back to that department. Pedophiles and rapes and domestic violence and sexual assault. There aren't many good news days. It chips away at your soul, you know." "So what are your options?" "Oh, an offer from the UK and New Zealand. Not to mention the Queenslanders wanting me." He nips at her chin. "You're making fun of me." She thinks of 1 or 2 of the jobs that have come up. The Attorney General's Department, infrastructure. Martha's waiting for a sign. A Gennaro sign. Seb was big on them. Like those seeds they planted in the early days of their grief when the house was just his. 1 tree for Loredana, 1 for Lottie. For months there was little growth, even though the soil was drained. The day after Seb kissed her for the first time, it flowered. It's a sign from them. She had put it down to 20 millimetres of rain the week before, but she remembers crying because she had wanted some sort of message from her mother. Seb's rule about signs was that they weren't as important as what people did with them. She lifts her chin from where it's resting on Ewan's chest. "I have to sell." "That could be a good thing, Martha." "Really?" she asks. And she can hear the bitterness in her voice. "For who?" "I'm going to get half of what it's worth, take away what's owing on it, and then I have to get a loan on a single public servant's salary to buy anything half decent in this area." "You can get a townhouse. We can be neighbours." The idea of living next door to a lover has Martha contemplating the possibilities. She sees him the next night at training, looks for a private glance while he takes them through their fitness regime. Sometimes she finds it, other times Ewan's caught up in whatever's going on in his life. He sends the team off on a couple of laps while he takes a phone call, Truly the world's shittiest coach, Elizabeth says. Her daughter is with her again, sitting by the sidelines and, as usual, not getting involved. Although Louise King is in gym gear, the most exercise she does is pick up her phone to check for messages. Elizabeth brings her to everything these days, training, the games, drinks. After high school, Louise scored a scholarship at Sydney Uni's St John's College and is now majoring in medicine. She's a humorless girl who doesn't say much, but Elizabeth's days of helicopter parenting certainly aren't over. Later, Martha updates them on Eugenia's purpose for being in Australia. She flies out here so her granddaughter will go for a mammogram? Julia says with disbelief. Well, cancer has wiped out most of the women in her family. I'm convinced they'll find something every time I'm up for mine, Sophie says. We know that, Dr. Google. We get the emails, Alana says. White wine contributes to cancer risk. Not so quiet, Louise says, eyeing Martha and the others when they're ordering another bottle of wine. As they go to leave, Elizabeth lets Ewan know that she can't play that Saturday. I'll be there, but I'm getting my hair done that morning for DJ's Fashion Week. So what? He says. The game's in the afternoon. Did you not hear me, Ewan? I'm getting a cut and blow-dry. Saturday's game is crucial, he tells them. If you lose this one, it'll be 3 in a row and it's hard to come back from that, especially when we're one person down. Louise can play, Alana suggests. Not a good idea, Elizabeth answers for her daughter. Why isn't it a good idea? Ewan wants to know, frustrated. Elizabeth ignores him and walks away with Louise in tow. Ewan broods as they get into the car. Can you believe it? He asks, outraged, directing the question at Martha. Can't believe it, she lies, because there's no way she'd play netball if she were getting her hair done the morning of the game. A block away from Dalhousie, Martha can see Rosie walking the dog, illuminated by the street light. For a couple of weeks, Rosie seemed to be out every second night, and Martha figured a guy was on the scene. But apart from nightly walks with Bruno while Eugenia looks after the baby, she hasn't heard Rosie come in late for at least a week. Isn't that the girl who serves Dad tea at the nursing home? Julia wants to know. Ewan suddenly pulls over, rolls down the window and calls out, Rosie! What are you doing? Martha asks. Rosie's shocked at first, scared. Then she seems to notice who it is and drags the dog to the car. When Bruno sees Martha, he slobbers all over the passenger side. Rosie glances into the car, acknowledges Julia with an arrogant toss of her head. Can you play netball? Ewan asks. Martha's surprised by the question. Rosie doesn't seem to miss a beat, her eyes meeting Martha's with a sense of menace. Only if I get to be centre. To pay Rosie back, Martha plays briscola with Eugenia all night, because cards and board games are one of the few things you can do with someone who doesn't understand a word you're saying. Last week when Jimmy was in town, he joined in. Sometimes he'd show Toto the cards and Martha would see the ghost of a smile on Eugenia's usually hard face. The older woman plays with no mercy. Martha can imagine that she's done much in her life with the same mindset. Although it doesn't endear her to people, it earns her a grudging respect from the more formidable locals. Eugenia's most surprising relationship is with the very pious Signora de Lorenzo, who's never had a moment's time for Martha until Eugenia. Signora would have been critical of Seb getting married so soon after his wife's death. Martha, on the other hand, has always been slightly fascinated by the woman's routine. Cleans the church on Monday, volunteers at the Ella Centre on Tuesday, boards the Wests League club bus on Wednesday for Tombola, looks after Jennifer and Steve's boys from number 132 on their date night every fortnight, gets her hair done at Teresa's on Saturday morning in what Sophie and Martha call the Lottie hair set, and then family over for lunch on Sunday. Martha's gathered too much evidence about the loneliness of the ageing population from her job over the years. She has to respect a woman who's created herself a community from what seems the mundane. Eugenia's recognised this and has used her time here well. Martha knows it's not about getting to know Signora de Lorenzo for the company. It's for the same reason Eugenia's come after Martha, to set up a support system for her granddaughter and great-grandson once she's gone, which means that Martha now gets to venture into the house that causes members of the Haberfield Historical Society's hearts to palpitate every time they walk past. Double-story, blonde brick pillars, concrete. But once inside, Martha doesn't give a shit about the tiles and the wallpaper. The crostoli and the sfogliatelli that have been denied to her all these years are now presented on plates with gold trim that remind her of Lottie's Bavarian tea set. Martha is so charmed, it causes her to tear up. The same can be said about the women in the delis in the IGA and pasticceria. They've all become Eugenia's translators. The customer in line at Zanetti's tells Martha that Eugenia wants her to keep the pressure on Rosie to get a mammogram, accompanied by the sign of the cross and a kiss of the fingers. In La Monica's, Eugenia is trying to explain to Martha that she would like scarpe, to escape. Scampi? Skype, the Italian girl behind the counter says, reminding Martha of a young Claudia Cardinale, because Martha's now watching 1960s romantic comedies as part of her pay TV obsession. La Signora Eugenia wants you to Skype her when she returns to Italy. At the pasticceria, the owner listens intently to what Eugenia's saying, sighs. Che? Martha asks, hoping she's not channeling Manuel from Fawlty Towers. Eugenia says not to sell la casa. Martha should be shattered that the suburb knows her business. Secretly, she's now grateful for the couple of free cannolis she gets every time she pops in, and the fact that she's no longer referred to as La Tedesca, the German amongst the older Italians, who forgave Seb for remarrying soon after Loredana's death, but not Martha. The main problem is that Martha has no idea how to convince Rosie, especially after last week's meltdown, at the mention of Loredana's death. Perhaps she'll go down the brutal path, the one along the lines of, if you don't go for a checkup with your history, you could be dead by the time your son's 14 and Jimmy will marry some girl who'll be the world's worst stepmother. Maybe a bit less brutal than that. Tonight, when they finish playing cards, Eugenia points to the coming Friday on the calendar, scribbles in the flight number, her way of telling them she's returning home. Martha wants to drag Eugenia down to Signora De Lorenzo's and ask her to beg Eugenia to stay. But Jimmy tells Martha that Eugenia can't stay. He found out through Rosie that Eugenia works at a local tabacceria and needs to hold on to the job or she won't be able to pay the rent. Eugenia drinks a couple of short blacks as though they are whiskey shots and eyes Martha with that look she's become used to. The one that Martha goes searching for because it's all empathy, but zero schmaltz. Coraggio, Martha. Because if anyone's privy to Martha's state of mind, it seems to be Eugenia. And maybe Jimmy as well. During these quiet tea and coffee drinking, card-playing marathons at the breakfast bar while Toto hammers into the walls, perhaps they've all walked that thin line of despair. On Friday morning, when Eugenia leaves, Rosie bawls, trying to embrace her, but her grandmother isn't the type. The older woman just keeps on walking until she gets into the cab. It doesn't mean Eugenia feels less. Martha thinks it means that she feels more, but is worried about the dam that'll burst if she ever lets the emotion get the better of her. At netball the next day, Martha embraces Scarlett and is introduced to Julia and Alana's children, Marley and Samuel, a wary pair, not particularly interested in another adult. But they're tight with Scarlett the way 6 and 8-year-olds can be, and impressed with Rosie's pair of wheels more than the baby inside. Can you push the pram? Rosie asks all three. They nod, slightly intimidated. She points out the perimeters. I want to see you at all times. I'm going first, Marley says. He does, Rosie says, pointing to the painfully shy Samuel. The trio take off with Toto and the pram. A lot of people, Martha says, watching the kids in the pram. She's used to trawling the newspapers for the worst stories about human nature and what can happen to kids. I'm watching them, Elizabeth says, securing her daughter's hair as though she's a 12-year-old and not a medical student who will be explaining stage 3 cancer to a patient in a couple of years. Good to see you contributing, Elizabeth, Ewan tells her. Fuck off, Ewan. They lose. But the score is getting better than in previous weeks. Rosie gets into 2 shoving bouts with her opponent, But she's fast and competitive and proves to be great at multitasking, yelling out, "Give him his dummy," to the kids while intercepting a ball. She refuses to throw it to Martha, who's in the clear more than once, and it costs them a couple of opportunities. They go to Papa's instead of the pub. "We could have won that," Julia says, coming back with gelatos for the kids. "But you didn't," Ewan says. "So don't be happy with could-haves." He points to Rosie. "And if you want to be part of this team, throw the ball to anyone who's in the clear." Everyone seems to agree with Ewan for once. Martha can't help feeling warmed by the support she's getting from a couple of past foes. "Anyone?" Rosie asks. "You mean your girlfriend?" All of a sudden, their support for Martha is replaced by interest in whatever Rosie has to say. She eyes Martha, enjoys what she's just stirred up. They had it off at a funeral. Martha hears a combination of gasps and laughs and snorts. Wouldn't mind slapping Rosie senseless. "Please, God, not Sister Mose," Sophie says. "She cursed us enough in our lives." "Charlie P's funeral in the Hunter," Julia says knowingly, looking over at Alana. "You owe me $20, babe." "Big deal," Elizabeth says. "Who hasn't had it off with Ewan?" "Gross," her daughter mutters. "I know, lovely. Mummy had low self-esteem in her teens." Sophie goes to speak. Martha knows that she'll refute the idea that she was one of those who slept with Ewan. Sophie's miraculously reinvented herself into the not-so-wild Sophie of her youth, but Elizabeth puts up a disdainful hand. "Caves Beach, 1980. Our version of Schoolies, the caravan. Don't deny it, Sophie." Martha wasn't invited to the 1980 bonding session. That would have been Julia's doing at the time, not that Martha's parents would have let her go. "I didn't sleep with Ewan," Alana says. "But I did pash him when I was 13. It's how I worked out I was a lesbian." Ewan takes any ridicule in his stride, and Martha can't help laughing with the others. In her 30s, she lived with a man who didn't take well to anyone taking the piss, almost to the verge of violence. "It's true," Alana says. "I had the biggest crush on him, and I thought that if Ewan Healy can't turn me on, his sister can?" Martha asks. "Well, we didn't work that out until our 21st. "When you've all finished laughing at my expense, can we talk about my game plan for next week?" Ewan says. Martha's forgotten about Rosie, but she's watching them all with Giotto on her lap making a mess with gelato. Later that night, lying with Ewan in the back of the Highlarks, Martha brings up his sister. "Can you believe Alana and Julia made a bet about us?" she says. "They bet on everything. The winnings go to the same account." She tries to get comfortable. "Why do you think your sister left me out of everything in high school?" "Does it matter? It was over 30 years ago." "I feel as if it still lingers." "She's stressed about Dad," he says. "She overstresses about the kids mostly. The courts are dragging this on and it's getting to both of them. But Julia has more time in the day to dwell on it. So I don't think she cares about whatever both of you clashed about back then." She leans her chin on his chest. "Did she like the wives?" He laughs. "You make me sound like a Mormon." "How does someone decent end up with 2 broken marriages?" He thinks for a moment. "Shooting blanks killed the first marriage. Not having kids consumed her and consumed us. She said it wouldn't, but it did. And when we worked out, it was me and not her." He shrugs. "She's got 4 kids now and never seemed to look back. I don't know what killed the second marriage. Maybe the wrong decision in the first place." He's contemplative. "My biggest mistake was being introduced by someone in the league world and thinking we had something in common." "Are you trying to tell me that the love of footy isn't enough to sustain a relationship?" He laughs. "What? You never met someone you thought you had everything in common with?" "Yes, for the first 20 years of my dating life. And the moment I met someone I had nothing in common with except for a dying loved one, he ended up being the one." "So I'm up against the one?" he asks softly. Their eyes meet, and she presses a kiss against his lips. "The strangest thing I'm ever going to say to you is that I wish you got a chance to meet him." Well, I can't say the same about my ex, he says. And to answer your question, no, my sister and Alana didn't like the wives. They tolerated them. My father was heartbroken by the end of the first marriage. He loved Jeannie. Wasn't as fussed by the second. He links his fingers with hers. So, are we going to move our sex life to your home anytime soon now that scary Eugenia's gone? He asks. Her aura still lingers. Give me a couple more days. Martha feels the intensity of his stare. Is it his aura that still lingers? Well, Seb did rebuild the house, so he's part of every inch of the place, she says. It's not what he wants to hear, but she can't find the exact words to reassure him. In her kitchen, she makes herself a cup of tea. The house already feels a touch lonelier, and Martha wonders how Eugenia and the activity she brought down the stairs became part of her normal. She hears a sound and looks up to see Rosie. Martha's at a loss about how to make things right before they sell this house and never see each other again. Because Rosie is a link to Martha's short and profound life with Seb, she feels a great sense of failure, that there will be nothing to take away except for money that may purchase her bricks and mortar, little else. Deep down, she wants to find a better way of telling Rosie that Loredana wasn't forgotten. There had been times, even after they were married, that Martha would come home early from work and hear Seb crying as he sanded the walls. When's the appointment? Rosie asks. Martha's confused for a moment. Wishes she was better prepared for this conversation. She fumbles for her phone and looks at the calendar. I made it for the 15th at 2 p.m. She's about to go into an explanation about why she didn't cancel it, but Rosie's already turned and walked away. Martha imagines this is what progress looks like.
This is the end of CD 4. The book continues on CD 5. CD 5.
Chapter 12. He arrives at Central, same time as always. Figures he'll take a chance and just head out to Rosie's. Except today, she's on platform 23 with Toto on her hip. At first, Jimmy thinks it's one big coincidence and that Rosie's taking the train to the airport. But she's peering over everyone's heads, and he knows they're waiting for him. Jimmy whacks everyone he passes with his duffel bag just to get to them. What are you doing here? He asks, taking Toto from her, and his voice sounds croaky because Toto's chortling into his neck. And at that exact moment, Jimmy's never loved anyone so much in his life. Obviously waiting for you, she says. He wants to hug her too, but instead he hitches Toto up in one arm and his duffel in the other, and they head out together. Do you want to get a bite to eat? He asks. Why shout? Why not? They end up in a beer garden on Glebe Point Road, where Jimmy goes off to find Toto a high chair. It's pretty crowded for a Monday night because of trivia. You want a beer or something? He asks. A Cooper's? Because it's what she drank the night he met her. Rosie nods, and when he returns with the menu, she studies it and then puts it down. I'll have the wedges. No, I'll do the ordering. Jimmy doesn't want to come across as chauvinistic, but he thinks she's only picking the wedges because they're the cheapest on the menu. When her steak and his pasta arrive, she makes up a little plate for Toto, and they take turns eating from each other's plates as if they've done it all their lives. Trivia's about to start, and they're interrupted a couple of times by some of the diehards asking for spare chairs at their table. Have you heard more from the paramedics? She asks. Yeah, but it's taking them forever to get to the next step. Rosie gives Toto a taste of beetroot and he seems to like it. What about your plans? He asks. I don't have an ATAR, but I can sit for a special tertiary admission test. She shrugs. It's pretty competitive, but I'm tossing up between a Bachelor of Nursing and a Bachelor of Midwifery. You're smart, he says. You'll get in. I don't feel very smart at the moment. He thinks of the phone text she was getting from some guy last time he was in Sydney and how dressed up she was for her date. Wonders if it's that guy who doesn't make her feel smart at the moment. Jimmy's never been one to beat around the bush, so he asks, "Is it serious? The guy you're dating?" Not to be nosy or anything, so if you don't want to talk about it, I'm totally fine. Although if you want to ask any questions about me, go ahead. Have you told your girlfriend about Toto? He ignores half of what she says because Jimmy's already told Rosie that he doesn't have a girlfriend. All of my friends know Toto's my number one priority. Rosie studies him, raises her eyebrows in a challenge, as if he's not telling the truth. She puts down her knife and fork. Your number one priority, is he? He's my number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I could count to 100 and it'd still be on the list, Jimmy says. A smile appears before she picks up her knife and fork again. His name is Lachlan, she says, and he's really funny and smart and sweet, but a bit immature and useless. It's a strange description for Jimmy to process, but it brings him hope. No one seems to know how to do anything useful, she says. Or maybe you do. Good to know that I'm not the least useless person you know. No, you're the most useful person I know. Is there a big difference? Big difference. Their eyes meet. Do you want to come back to the house? She asks. And because the only way Jimmy and Rosie know how to connect is by having sex, he spends his first night under the same roof as his son, and they need to be quiet. Because Toto is in the cot, and Martha's downstairs, and Rosie's shushing Jimmy the entire time because he's talking 100 miles an hour. He can't stop, because home's just had a whole new dimension added to it. Her and Toto and this house and a kitchen that smells of comfort food and a glimpse of how it can be. And she's straddling him, and he's about to tell her that maybe, in that top 100 priority list, Rosie's there. But she's just saying, shut up, and it's muttered into his neck as they shudder together. And then life gets simple and complicated and back again. He learns to compartmentalise, lies to Mackie, Tara and Frankie, tells them he got into Sydney a day late, lies to them again and says he has to look after Toto, so he'll probably spend the night on Rosie's couch. On the nights he stays at Mackie's and Tara's, he tells Rosie that he'll be working on the paramedics application and it's all on Tara's computer. There's a voice in his head demanding to know why he's not telling the truth, and Jimmy figures it's because he's never had to balance people before. He's frightened that those he cares for won't like each other. In his daytime world, life is more simple. Jimmy goes to swimming lessons with Rosie and Toto, and she introduces him to friends with babies who are Toto's age. He likes that Rosie has these women looking out for her when he's away. One of them, Yolanda, comes from Moree, where Jimmy spent a couple of months back in 2008, so they end up knowing a few of the same people. On Wednesday night, he watches Rosie and Martha train for netball with a bunch of women who drink a lot of wine afterwards, has a conversation with the guy Martha's flirting with, and it lasts 5 minutes. It's not that he doesn't like Ewan, it's that they have absolutely nothing in common. He gets an exchange of texts from Will on Thursday, and he sends him a photo of Toto. "Too good looking to be yours," is the response, and then "How's Frankie?" Jimmy goes for the truth and texts, "Missing you, feeling underrated." And despite it all, Will's response makes him chuckle. "I didn't know you felt that way about me, Hayla." On Saturday, Mackie convinces him to bring Toto along to a birthday party at his Aunt Georgie's house. The guy Georgie's married to has a son, Callum, from a previous relationship, who's turning 10. A wrestling fanatic and devotee of his step-cousins, Tom and Annabelle Mackie. They've set up a wrestling ring in the backyard and Annabelle's wearing Viking horns while Mackie's got a pair of tights on, his jock's on the outside. They're both a comedy act waiting to be discovered, and when they put on a show, a roar of laughter from the kids is matched by the adults. Jimmy has never seen Tara crack up so much, her arm around Mackie's mum. He can't help thinking how some families break and can be put back together again. Others, like Jimmy's, cave. 4 years ago, the Mackies were a mess. Scattered across 2 states, grief-stricken, angry at the world and at each other. What has worked out about other people's families is that the lifeline can come from any direction. He figures that the key to it is a good foundation to begin with. The Haylers were doomed from the start. They didn't even have a grip on reality. Their lives were fueled by alcohol and drugs and unemployment and failed relationships and bad luck and stupid decisions and a lack of faith in each other. His grandpop lied about everything. One day he'd get a job. One day he'd stop gambling and drinking and smoking and flushing the pension down the toilet. Jimmy spent his childhood being sent into pubs or the TAB or down to the greyhound races. "Tell him there's no fucking food in the house," Jimmy's mum would say. She at least was truthful about one day. One day she was going to leave. One day she'd get out of this shithole of a family. It was his nan who made some sort of a difference when she was alive. A martyr to the parish, volunteering to organise flowers for weddings, typing up the minutes, cleaning up the sacristy. The reward was that it got her grandson into St Sebastian's on a community scholarship. It's where Jimmy spent 4 years known as the school crazy guy until Frankie and the girls came along in Year 11, dragging Mackie in with them. Standing in Georgie's backyard, holding his son and watching the Mackie lunacy, Jimmy wants to believe he can be like all of them, a lifeline to himself, so he can be one for Toto and Rosie. Mackie joins him with a plate of assorted, god-awful kids' party food. He holds a deviled egg up to Toto. "No? Are you sure?" "He's more than sure," Jimmy says with a laugh, putting Toto down because he's beginning to squirm. Mackie introduces Jimmy to a whole lot of people whose names he won't remember, but they seem to know about him, either because Jimmy had helped out the Finch Mackies in Walgett, or because they're somehow connected to Martha, of all people. "Abe's sister is friends with her," a woman called Lucia tells him, pointing to her partner, who he figures is Abe. "Alana? They're in the same netball team." "The school principal," Jimmy says, pleased he remembers being introduced to Alana earlier that day at the game. "Annabelle reckons she spotted you there this morning," Mackie says. "Just babysitting Toto while his mum plays," Jimmy says. Vicious game. "I'll join you next time." Toto stumbles and falls, and Mackie's father, Dom, picks him up. "I was younger than you when we had Tommy," Dom tells Jimmy. "I miss them at this age." "Any advice?" Jimmy asks, because someone like Dom Mackie had seen the dark side, but managed to get his family back. "Yes," Dom says. "Don't be scared to ask for help." That night he goes out with Rosie. Ewan is at the house and Jimmy attempts small talk in the kitchen. "It's sort of our first date, so I wanted to put thought into it," he explains, after telling Ewan that they're going to the drag races up at Eastern Creek. "Your first date?" At the netball, Martha had introduced Jimmy as Toto's father, so the first date thing doesn't seem to make sense to Ewan. Rosie has organised for the Italian woman across the road to look after Toto. He figures from the body language that Signora and Rosie have attitude between them, but the woman seems to love Toto, so it's an easy handover. "She's a bitch," Rosie says as they walk up to the bus stop. "Then why are you leaving him with her?" "Because she'll never let anything happen to him." At the speedway, they eat hot dogs and chips, and Rosie talks about adrenaline and noise, and how sometimes it's just Toto's crying or the feeling that there's no one around that gets to her. She looks sad when she says that, and he senses it's about missing people, so he asks about her father, and Rosie tells Jimmy that he used to fix racing cars and most of their Friday nights were spent at the speedway. "I'm sorting through my photos with Teresa next door, so once I'm finished, I'll introduce you to my family," she says. When they go to pick up Toto, Signora sends them away because he's sleeping, so Rosie lets Jimmy stay again. Later, she's lying on him and he feels like he's under inspection. "I don't even know how to describe you," she says, grabbing at his face, pinching at his cheek, checking out his hairline. "What colour are your eyes?" "Murky grey, and my hair is murky brown, and my skin is pasty white." She places her head on his chest and stays there, and Jimmy knows he loves her. He's frightened to say it because he's scared the words will come out lame. Knows there's a cruel side to Rosie, who'll react badly because she doesn't know how to trust anyone. "We don't even have a photo of us dating to show Toto one day," she says. "Everyone else does. Just a little glimpse of us together so we can say, 'This is who we were before you came along.'" "Is that important?" he asks. "My favourite photos of my mum and dad are those from before I was born, because they were so into each other, and I can see this love in her eyes that says, I trust this guy to fucking bits. After dinner at Frankie's the next night, Mia and Bob Spinelli take Toto for a walk, while Jimmy works on the next phase of his paramedics application with Frankie. The good behaviour bond won't go down well, he says. He's sitting on her bed, studying her walls as if seeing them for the first time. Loads and loads of photos. She must be the only person left alive who still gets them printed. He thinks of Rosie, working with her next-door neighbour to get the family photos organised. Jimmy has none. A few on his phone of Toto, 1 or 2 of these guys when they were in high school. Frankie is reading the criteria and shakes her head. I disagree about the good behaviour bond. They want good character references and they want to know how you feel about the charges. But there's nothing here that says they'll discriminate. Can you copy some of those photos of us at school? He says. She looks to where he's pointing and there's a soft smile on her face. I remember in year 11 when it was just the 6 of us, she says wistfully. We were sort of losers who found each other. I miss that a bit. I love every one of my friends now, but I miss us. I feel as if Siobhan is never going to live in Australia again, and I wish Justine was here, and I even miss the double T's. They just know so many other people and I don't get to see them as much as I want to. They say the same thing about you and Will. It's Will who dominates Frankie's photos. Jimmy thinks of what Rosie said earlier and knows there's enough evidence on these walls to say that Frankie trusts this guy to fucking bits. How do you get 8 years together to work? He asks. She thinks for a moment. We let each other keep our own friends, she says. We respect each other's families. We have the same values. We want the same things. We're best friends. We don't get turned on by fights or drama. You need to be over there, mate, he says, because he knows how much Frankie misses Will. You know that. You promised him. Do you want to know a secret? She asks. I could live with my parents for the rest of my life. That's not a big secret, Frankie, he says. I could live with your parents for the rest of my life. I haven't even questioned where they've taken Toto. She holds up a red plastic folder from one of the trays on her desk. ANU has an exchange program with the University of Milan, so I'm thinking of working on my PhD over there, she says. Jimmy spins a globe on her desk, studies the proximity and points. You can have a dirty weekend in Liechtenstein whenever you want. It looks halfway between Milan and Stuttgart. She takes a ragged breath and Jimmy thinks she's going to cry. I'm not angry because Will stopped asking me to marry him, as if he has to. I'm angry because he stopped asking what I want to do with my life. When he leaves, Mia helps rug up Toto for the bus ride home, and because he asked Don Mackey for advice, he asks her the same. She hugs them both. Guilt is a burden, so forgive yourself for the mistakes. Jimmy and Rosie sit together on the bus to Central with Toto on his lap. He can sense her looking at him, and when his eyes meet hers, Jimmy feels tenderness beyond anything. He's never used that word in his head to describe the longing for anyone in his life. Not even with Frankie, because maybe tenderness belongs to lovers or kids, not necessarily your own. He can see resigned sadness in Rosie's expression, and he figures they both want whatever this is between them, but it's not easy with Toto in the picture, yet unfathomable without him there. At Central, he kisses her, hugs Toto and walks away, but she follows him up to the gates. Can you tell whoever you're sleeping with that it's over? She asks. Even if it doesn't seem anything special. Why? He says with false bravado, because he wants to hear the truth about how she feels. You're sort of like an ID thing, she says. 20 points for usefulness, 20 points for being good in bed, 20 points for being decent, and you get triple bonus points because Toto's your top 100 priority. He moves closer to her, kisses her again. Can't stop despite Toto trying to pull his hair. Can you shave off points from usefulness and decency and give me extra for being good in bed? She laughs, but there's a shrewd challenge in her eyes. It would have to come out of your Toto triple bonus points. Thanks, but no thanks, he says, not missing a beat. I think I'll hang on to those bonus points. Chapter 13. Rosie spends every afternoon next door at Teresa's, going through the photos she took back from Luke's garage, while Bianca babysits Toto and the dogs out back. Teresa and Signora De Lorenzo are the only two who know where to place most of them chronologically in an album. When Rosie looks at the images scattered across the table, she can't help thinking that the life of the Gennaros is reduced to a size 8 hush puppy's shoebox. Teresa slides a photo towards her. "It's a beautiful one, regardless of where it was taken, Rosanna," she says quietly. Rosie glances at it, pushes it away, and concentrates on one where she's sitting on the bonnet of her mum's car where she was about 8 years old. She shows it to Teresa. "Sometimes she'd turn up at school and I'd have to interpret for her," Rosie says. "She'd make me tell my teacher that I had to leave early because we had an appointment, but it was bullshit really. She just wanted to go for a drive." "She was a cool one, your mother. Most of us would have gone crazy living in that house, the way it was for years, but Loredana never seemed fazed." That shrug of hers said it all. Did people think my dad was a loser for taking so long? No. Some said he should have sold it when he was getting the offers because he could have made a profit. My father would never have sold. Rosie knows that there were years the house stayed untouched because they didn't have a cent. And then when Loredana got sick, he just didn't have the heart to work on it. The coffee's ready and Teresa gets up to turn off the stove. The council and the Historical Society would be on his back because they said it looked like a hoarder's house with all the material out front. Yeah, well, look at it now, it's amazing. That house has been built by many hands, Bella. Rosie doesn't want to bring Martha into this discussion. For my mum and me and Nonna Eugenia. Teresa doesn't respond. It's what he used to say all the time, isn't it? Rosie demands, because she wants a vindication from someone who heard those words. Teresa stares at a photo of the house, its front lawn packed with rubbish and building material. A skip forever out front. Hay una casa por la mia familia, Seb would say. A house for my family. She takes Toto to swimming lessons with Tess and Yolanda, who suggests the three of them join a basketball team. The comp doesn't start for a couple of months, so we've got time to get fit. I haven't played for years, Tess says. If it's during the day and they have a creche, I'm in. Rosie likes the idea of being in a team with them. Although she knows they're not going to bail on her, deep down she'd like to hang out with them more. I know someone who can get us fit, she tells them, although she doesn't mention you and Healy's name because they might not rate a guy who got sacked from being a coach. If you guys are free Wednesday nights, he trains a netball team down at Neald Park. Out of all the visitors at the nursing home, she sees the Healys most. Rosie shouldn't have favourites, but John Healy goes from long periods of silence to bursts of conversation and reminds her of Jimmy. "It was a knock-on, for sure," he tells her while she's serving him lunch. "And that idiot ref Frank Crombie needs a bloody pair of glasses because anyone can see." Rosie thinks it's a sad sort of peculiar that someone can't remember the people he loves but can recall every single detail of a game that took place almost 40 years ago. When she returns with afternoon tea, Julia Healy is there with her daughter Marley, who looked after Toto at the netball game that one time. Julia takes a long-neck bottle of beer out of her backpack and opens it, pouring a glass for her dad. "That's not his t-shirt," she says to Rosie. "Can you tell the nurses to stop dressing him in other people's clothes?" "You should tell them." On the mantelpiece, there's an old black and white wedding photo, and Rosie suspects it's John and his wife because he looks exactly like Ewan. "Where's your mum?" Rosie asks Julia, who is now sorting her father's clothes and chucking on the ground anything that doesn't belong to him. "She died when Ewan and I were babies." "Are you twins?" "No, but we were born in the same year." Marley is sitting outside on the veranda playing chess with John. Julia catches Rosie looking at them. "He was Pop John from the moment our kids came to live with us," she says. It's as if their hearts had met the moment they came face to face. Marley and Samuel belonged to him. Julia Healy is about to cry, which is strange because she seems the type who makes other people cry. Rosie looks at Marley and John Healy instead, Sad that Toto won't ever have that relationship with her father or Jimmy's crap parents. How did he look after you? Rosie asks. 2 babies in the old days? I don't appreciate the old days comment, Julia says, and she's not joking either. They wanted to put us into St. Joseph's home at Croydon, but the Chairballs moved in next door. Layla, Alana's mum, took over. We were sort of raised with all of them. Were you always in love with Alana? Julia eyes her. You're chatty today. Just asking. Alana was Ewan's best friend. They were inseparable because they loved sport. I was a third wheel when we were at school. One of the registered nurses pokes her head in and then keeps on walking because Julia is the Healy most of the staff try to avoid. Julia goes after her anyway. A moment later, Marley comes back inside wanting to know where her mum is. Hassling the nurses, Rosie says, grabbing the fresh sheets from the cupboard. Come and help me. Who's looking after your baby? Marley asks, starting on the pillowcases. The lady across the road from where I live. Just say she hurts him. She won't hurt him. How do you know that? Marley demands to know. Because I trust her. Ewan arrives just as his sister and niece are leaving. He flicks Marley on the brow with a finger and she laughs, doing it back to him. Julia orders her brother to tell the registered nurses that she wants John's medication reduced. They're turning him into a zombie, Ewan. Give this place a chance, Jules. When the others are gone, Rosie asks him about training. How many? He asks. 3 of us? Because I'm not interested in adding another couple of chatty Cathys to the mix. What's a chatty Cathy? I'm just saying. He tests the heat of the mug and puts it into his dad's hands. And you'll have to find someone to look after Toto because I don't want kids and babies at training. It's not Toto, she says, mimicking the way he says it. Don't tell someone named Ewan how to pronounce names, he says. I've spent a lifetime correcting people. Rosie understands Ewan's irritation because at training on Wednesday night, Martha and the women are annoying and talk too much. Later, they go down to the pub and Rosie sits with Yolanda and Tess at the end of the table. Louise sits with them. She's Elizabeth's daughter, and twice Rosie has seen her turn up and not get involved. They're always this loud, Louise tells them. I'm embarrassed to be around them, Rosie says. Tess leans close to her. Does the coach and your stepmother have a thing going on? Rosie glances over to where Ewan is laughing at something Martha said. He's apparently slept with most of them, Louise tells them. She delivers everything in the same tone. Rosie hasn't worked her out yet. Why don't you like Martha? Yolanda asks. I think she's cool. She stole my house, Rosie tells them. You don't know how it feels to... Yolanda puts her hand up to stop her. Don't go there. Rosie counts to 10 because she doesn't want to go around sounding insensitive or racist. What else don't you like about her? Tess asks. Isn't that enough? My stepmother's a cow, Yolanda says. Don't get me started. So now we're going to have a competition about whose stepmother is the worst? Rosie asks. I'd win, Rosie. Louise is looking from one to the other. I haven't worked out whether you're friends or not, Louise says. We're friends with different versions of evil stepmothers, Yolanda says. Later when they're leaving, Rosie tells them she won't be at Learn to Swim. I'm going for a checkup. The others are eyeing her. A mammogram. Why? Tess asks. Just to work out if I have that breast cancer gene that runs in my family. The BRCA gene, Louise tells them. Everyone has it, but some have a mutant one. Does that mean you have cancer? Yolanda asks. Rosie shakes her head, but looks at Louise, who seems to have all the answers. If it's the mutant gene, she has a higher chance of getting it, Louise says bluntly. That stops conversation for a moment. I'll come with you, Yolanda says. Rosie shakes her head. Martha's taking me. That's pretty evil of her. Parramatta Road is a car park the next morning as they drive to the Strathfield Breast Clinic. 4 lanes of traffic and they're stuck in the one that's about to turn onto the M4 when that's the last thing they want to do. This city's a joke, Martha mutters, beeping her horn and trying to get into the left lane for the 3rd time. Are you a mutant? Rosie asks, doing her bit and sticking her hand out the window to stop the car coming up beside them. Martha squeezes into the lane and gives the obligatory wave of thanks. Yes, I am, she says. Does it frighten you? Martha doesn't answer for a moment. I have a mammogram twice a year and a scan once a year. I get very nervous around that time. But I tell myself that even if they find something, they'll catch it in time because I'm checked regularly. What do you think you'll do if they find something? I know exactly what I'd do, Martha says, without a doubt. Is that why you haven't committed to Ewan? Martha turns to her stunned. A car beeps behind them because she's driving too slow. Martha gives them the finger without looking away from Rosie. Why would you say that? What's stopping you from going out properly? It's not as if you're both too young to date. Have you told him? There's nothing to tell. It's pretty obvious to me that you don't want to commit to him because you're worried. That's none of your business, Rosie. It ends any conversation until they turn off Parramatta Road. There's a chance you might not have the mutant gene, Martha says, as if the subject of Ewan never came up. It skipped Eugenia. My nonna's got 9 lives, regardless of how fucked they all are. Rosie misses Eugenia. She misses a buzz of the nights in the kitchen and belonging to someone. Without Eugenia around, she has to try harder to connect. Your father never had a bad word to say about her, Martha says, despite him being furious when he went to Palermo to live with her. Rosie can't bear to think of that time, not only because of the betrayal of her father marrying Martha, but because she wants that year back. She wants every one of those days, every hour and minute, so she can build up more memories with her father, because the photos in the shoebox aren't enough to tell the story of their lives. When I turned up on her doorstep that time, Eugenia slapped me so hard across the face that she split my lip. Rosie doesn't know why she admits that to Martha, who takes her eyes off the road for a moment. She wanted you out of there. Rosie nods. I remember walking past one of the bars in San Filippo Neri, and this man made a gesture like he was going to cut my throat. I thought my father had got up to no good when he was younger, but I think it was Eugenia. There were heaps of rumours about her. Such as? Rosie can't forget the sickness in her stomach when she first heard the worst of the stories. Doesn't know whether she wants to tell Martha and can't find a reason why not. That Eugenia was raped by more than one man, and that's how my mum came about. Christ! Who told you that? Just these dickheads I used to hang out with over there. They heard it from their fathers and uncles, that Eugenia deserved it. She glances over at Martha. I smashed one of them in the face for saying that, you know. He cried worse than Toto ever has. Good for you. When my parents met, Eugenia gave my father a wad of money and told him to take her daughter away. He didn't know where she got it from, and my mother told him not to ask. You reckon that's what he used to buy the house? Rosie nods. She doesn't want to say the obvious, that if it wasn't for Eugenia, Martha wouldn't have a home. Then if she knows these lowlives, what's kept her safe? Martha asks. Rosie shrugs. She says that when you get old, men stop looking at you, but they also stop wanting to kill you. I have a feeling that men haven't stopped looking at Eugenia. The mammogram is the weirdest thing Rosie's ever had done to her boobs. Like some sort of crazy sandwich press, except it's cold and it pinches. After that, she sees a breast specialist who asks her to remove her t-shirt again. Her kindness makes Rosie feel safe. She thinks of Jimmy, another one of the kind ones. Such an underrated word. Rosie wishes she had gone searching for that quality in people when she was younger. Do you know who your mum's breast doctor was, lovely? Rosie shakes her head. Martha might know, she says. The doctor asks her a whole heap of questions while she's feeling Rosie's boobs and then gets her to sit up. All good. And then she tells Rosie that nothing's come up in the mammogram, but it's best for her to have the test to see if she's got the BRCA mutant gene. My friend says it's expensive. Last night Louise had said it was. You don't have to worry about paying for it, lovely. It's offered to people under 50 with a family history. What if it comes back positive? Rosie asks. Having the mutant gene doesn't mean you have cancer, but it'll mean I have a higher chance of getting it. How about you don't worry about any of that now? First, work out if you want to have the test, and we'll take it from there. After that, Martha drives Rosie down to Westfield and announces that she's going to buy her a dress. Why? Because I didn't get to buy you an 18th or 21st birthday dress. What's such a big deal about an 18th and a 21st? In my day, it was a big deal. On your 18th, you had your first drink. On your 21st, you wrote yourself off. Coming of age stuff. I did that when I was 15. They end up in David Jones. Go on, choose something fancy, Martha says. You can wear it next time you go karting with Jimmy. Sometimes Rosie wants to laugh at what Martha says, but doesn't want to give her the satisfaction. She doesn't want to ever let Martha know that there are things around the house that bring Rosie comfort, like the porcelain figurine in the kitchen of the little boy in the apple tree, or the cuckoo clock in the front room that always makes Toto chuckle. She finds a couple of things she likes and heads into the dressing rooms. Too short? She asks. It's lace with a tight bodice and skinny straps. You're not going to have that body forever, Rosie, so flaunt it as much as you can for as many years as you can. Rosie does the rounds the next day with a tea cart and finds Ewan in his father's room setting up a big flat-screen TV. There are more photos in the room, as though Ewan and Julia are coming to terms with the fact that John's not going home again. Alana's mother turns up. She's been around once or twice and calls Rosie Habibi. Let's go for a walk, John, Layla says, an accent in her voice because she was born in Lebanon. Rosie remembers Julia saying that Layla had helped raise John's children, so it must feel like a double family if their daughters are partners. Your father must have never got over your mum, she says to Ewan, looking at the old wedding photo. I don't know, because he never spoke about it. My father forgot about my mother 11 months after she died. Ewan looks up from scanning the TV. It doesn't work that way, Rosie. I don't think people forget a person they loved just because someone else comes along. No offense, but you're twice divorced. You're not exactly a pin-up boy for everlasting love. He chuckles. True, but I think I'm in love with a woman who still loves a man she was married to. Rosie wonders if Ewan's told Martha any of this. Martha hasn't forgotten your father, he says, and I can't imagine him forgetting your mum. I'm sure Martha had to cope with her ghost in the same way I have to deal with Seb's. There's a grimace. And is a bloody big ghost, as big as that house. Rosie knows that there's more than her father holding Martha back. Well, the house is going to be out of your way soon, Rosie says. Like I've said to Martha, that might not be a bad thing. When Toto and Jimmy are both sleeping that night, Rosie hears Martha in the kitchen, and she ventures down with a photo. There are times at night when Rosie would like to sit in the kitchen, like she used to when Eugenia was here, but it's an unspoken rule that it's Martha's territory after 8 p.m. Martha's studying her computer screen, maybe checking out jobs, because Rosie heard her mention it to Ewan. I thought you might want this, Rosie says, sliding over the photograph. She couldn't bear to look at it the other day at Teresa's, but when she finally did, in the confines of her room, she had to agree that it's pretty beautiful. Martha stares at it, her mouth trembling, so Rosie walks away, because she doesn't want to think of Martha being that human. In the morning, when she goes to leave the house to drop off Toto at Signora's, she sees a photo on the sideboard next to the porcelain figurines. Rosie and Martha's mums in the cancer ward at RPA with their heads bare, laughter in their eyes. Taken by her father, no doubt, or maybe that lovely woman who used to cheer everyone up at chemo. Rosie can imagine that some of those patients are gone. Others, she hopes, have been 7 years cancer-free. Her father used to say that cancer isn't racist or ageist, and it's not homophobic. It lets anyone in, an equal opportunity club. She studies the photo because Rosie's obsession with wanting to connect with her mum has grown ever since she had Toto. She sees her father in Toto all the time, especially his eyes and the colour of his skin. She gets a sense of Sebastiano Gennaro in the house, in the neighbourhood, everywhere. But she can't find enough to bring Loredana back. Rosie had thought the photos would work magic, but once again, her mother only comes in fragments, and Rosie owes Toto more than pieces of their lives. Chapter 14. Martha wakes to Lottie telling her not to respond to text messages, which is ridiculous, really, because Martha's mother wouldn't have known what a text message was back then. Lottie still had one of those telephones that required the force of a finger, but the voice that wakes her is clear and emphatic. So when the message comes from the real estate agent advising that a response is needed urgently if Dalhousie Street is going to make the spring market, Martha ignores it. That day, the netball team win their first game by 1 point. In her humble opinion, it's a clear example of brilliant teamwork, although most of the opposing players are in their 30s. She finds them the least competitive demographic because they haven't hit the desperation of wanting to be fit in their 40s or fabulous in their 50s. They're more like the fuck off we're in our 30s lot. Why don't we go to the pub and celebrate? Martha suggests, avoiding the 3 text messages on her phone. You go to the pub and celebrate when you lose, Rosie says. What's the difference? You don't have to come. They're at Briar's in Concord because they have the kids with them, and Sophie's the expert on kid-friendly beer gardens in the inner west. Ewan's writing out next week's game plan on a napkin, as if any of them give a shit. Let's just live in the moment, Ewan, Martha says, taking the napkin and neatly folding it. She tells them about Lottie's instruction this morning. You do know it's your subconscious desire instructing you, Julia says. What a thing to say, Sophie says. Of course it's her mother. Really, Sophie, Elizabeth challenges. I'm going to put this all down to ethnic superstition. That's a generalisation, Julia says. Alana's not into ethnic superstition and she's a leb. Alana nods in agreement. When Julia goes to break up an argument between the kids, just as Elizabeth's phone rings, Alana leans in close to Martha. Of course it's your mother. It's only Elizabeth's tone in her phone conversation that stops Martha from wanting more analysis. Where are you? Elizabeth asks. And then there's a whole lot of, it's all right, you're fine. Just turn off the ignition, which renders everyone at the table silent. When Alana clicks her fingers for attention, Elizabeth mouths, Louise, and they wait to see what it all means. Elizabeth doesn't look distressed, but resigned, sad really. She questions how and what Lulu's feeling, and Martha hears Rosie clicking with frustration beside her. Let me try, Rosie says, giving Toto to Scarlett and holding her hand out for the phone. For once, Elizabeth does as she's told. Panic attacks, she tells them, grabbing her bag. She's pulled over on the City West link. I'll go, Ewan says. You're over the limit anyway, Elizabeth. Elizabeth waves away his offer, but the others convince her to stay. Rosie's still on the phone, walking away as if she's some counselling expert. Elizabeth gives Ewan a couple of details and he heads off. She's still watching Rosie, who doesn't seem fazed by the conversation she's having. When did they bond? Elizabeth asks. The southern end of the table bitch about us all the time, especially when the basketballers join us, Sophie says. Elizabeth rubs her eyes. Martha doesn't know whether it's from exhaustion or whether she's hiding tears, because her expression never changes. How long has Louise had these attacks? Alana asks. Beginning of the year, a lot of anxiety to start with. It came out of the blue and it's just crippled her. Oh, Elizabeth. I spent a fortnight delivering her to the exam hall and sitting in the car park at Sydney Uni last month. She doesn't want to lose her scholarship, but I've had to move her back home. Why didn't you tell us, you goose? Sophie says. And what can you do about it? Nothing, but we could hear you out. Elizabeth waves them off. It's all I talk about, to psychologists, naturopaths, GPs. Sometimes I just want to talk shit and forget about it. About 20 minutes later, Rosie returns with the phone. Ewan's there. He said your other daughter's arrived and is following them home. Rosie takes Toto from Scarlett and sits down to her cold French fries. What did you say to her? Elizabeth asks. Rosie shrugs. I just told her about the netball game and how you guys went berserk when you won, by a point. Oh, come on, Rosie, Alana says. We were fantastic. Rosie ignores everyone, agreeing with Alana, and concentrates on Elizabeth. When these attacks happen, Louise doesn't want to talk about how she's feeling, Rosie says. She wants the stress in her head to pass, and the only way that happens is if she keeps preoccupied. Elizabeth is nodding, taking it all in. So next time just talk about banal stuff, Rosie continues, like your lives. When did you turn into Obi-Wan Kenobi? Martha asks. It's Yoda to you, Martha. Elizabeth stands up, grabbing her purse. There's protest from all around. Stay, Elizabeth. Ewan's got it under control. Chill, Elizabeth says. I'm just getting Yoda some hot chips. When she returns, they discuss it more. I think Lulu regrets not taking a gap year from being the best at everything, Elizabeth says. She's too young to have regrets, Julia says. Tell her to buy a backpack and head overseas. I regret not doing that, Alana says. Back in the 80s, all my teaching friends ended up in London, and that gets them talking about regrets, which Rosie says is her cue for telling them she'd rather take a bus home than listen to them a minute longer. Off you go then, Martha says. The others watch Rosie walk away with Toto. I'm sorry, but I just can't help liking her, Julia says, laughing. She's great with Dad. And was such a shit to her own, Martha wants to say, but she doesn't because she has to take some of the blame. What's your regret, babe? Alana asks Julia. Keeping you waiting until I had the guts to come out. How long? Sophie asks. Long enough to go out with a guy and get engaged. We love him, Alana says. He's been our financial advisor for years. Your turn, Martha. Martha's regrets are too many, but she concentrates on the one that wakes her every morning. I regret not taking my mother to Omoramagao, she says. My father refused to go back all their lives, and then, after he died, I was too busy working. Next minute she had cancer and was dead within a year. Sophie looks like she's going to cry because she loved Lottie and was inconsolable when she died. Oh, and I regret losing my virginity to the guy behind the bar at Jackson's on George, Martha adds. I begged you not to order that fourth Kahlua and Coke, Sophie tells her, opening up a bag of crisps for the kids and sending them to the next table. I regret spending 4 years married to a dick, she whispers when Scarlett's out of earshot. Big dick, Martha agrees, because she couldn't stand Sophie's first husband. He had a big dick, or he was a big dick? Elizabeth asks. Definitely the latter, Sophie says. But I was determined not to marry a Greek guy, so I regret not listening to my cousin Ariadne, who kept telling me about her accountant. I didn't get to meet George for another 15 years. And has St. George, hero of the Peloponnesus, got a big dick? Shh, Elizabeth. Elizabeth pours herself another glass of wine. Well, I'm sure you all know what mine is, she says, and Martha figures they'll finally discover the truth about the disappearing husband. Obviously that perm I got for the Year 12 formal. That's probably why Ewan dumped you, Alana says, just as he walks back in, oblivious to what they've been discussing. What about you? Alana asks him. Do you regret doing the Men of League calendar and showing off that hairy chest? I regret agreeing to coach you lunatics. Martha keeps herself busy that week. Sophie's helping George out at the office because his receptionist is off sick, so Martha picks up Scarlett every afternoon and takes her back to the house until Sophie comes to collect her. Elizabeth's off to a buyers' conference in Brisbane on Wednesday, so she takes her to the airport. What time does your plane get in? Martha asks when she pulls up in front of the terminal. Don't be ridiculous, Martha. You're not picking me up during peak hour. Of course I am. The taxi line will take ages. She decides to do a St. John's ambulance course with Julia, who needs to be up to date because of the adoption application. Later they go down to Papa's for a coffee. Every time I do one of these courses, I sort of wish someone will have a heart attack near me so I can put them in the recovery position. Julia laughs. You're an idiot. Their cannoli arrives along with a little box of Italian pastries for Julia's father. How much longer is this adoption going to take? Martha asks. We stopped playing with numbers about 5 years ago, Julia says. But we're no longer in the children's court, so that's a relief. Hopefully we'll get a date for the Supreme Court and we'll be a tiny step closer. She's drained. Martha doesn't know anyone coming out of the children's court who isn't. She soon finds herself under Julia's scrutiny. But let's talk about you. Nothing to talk about. I'll be back at work by October. And the house? Because no disrespect to your mother, but you can't be taking real estate advice from the dead, Martha. Not true. I've been watching this medium show on the entertainment channel and it's exactly what she does. Julia is studying her. I like seeing my brother happy. Martha doesn't want to speak about Ewan because last week when she drove Rosie to the breast clinic, it reminded her that back in February, she had almost worked out exactly what she was going to do about the family's history with breast cancer. And then Charlie's funeral happened and she met Ewan. When he came back from Charlie P's funeral, there was something different about him, Julia says. The sacking had turned him into a hermit and all of a sudden he came back to life. She smiles and it softens her. Martha has only seen the side of Julia stressed by her children's legal status and her father's Alzheimer's. Back then, Alana and I found him going through my old photo albums. He pointed to one of us back in year 12 and asked, "Is that Martha Newman?" I've driven Alana crazy ever since. So a bit of a coincidence that Sister Mo wanted me at her funeral, Martha says. Sister Mo didn't give a rat's ass about any of us except Elizabeth. Not even Sophie? Sophie was that Greek Orthodox girl, Julia says, mimicking Sister Mo's Irish brogue. I was the motherless one. Who was I? Julia grimaces. She didn't remember you. Martha who? I knew it. What a cow. Julia shrugs. I just want my brother to be happy. So Sister Mo's funeral seemed a good opportunity to get in contact with you. If I had been forced to do a liturgical dance because of a lie, I'd have to kill someone. They finish their coffees and sweets and Martha walks Julia to the car. What did we fight about at school? Martha asks. I can't remember. But it had to have started in first form because there was never a time you weren't mean to me. And I feel as if I hadn't forgiven you all these years, when I should have, because it all seems so petty now. Julia laughs with disbelief, goes to speak, but changes her mind. No, say it, Martha says. Julia hesitates. You were the first person to call me a dyke, Martha, she finally says. We were 13 and you must have suspected. Maybe at the same time I was figuring it out. Martha feels as if something hard has been slammed into her chest. And I have forgiven how you made me feel, but I've never forgotten because I'm reminded every once in a while. So you've thought I was homophobic all these years? Martha asks. God no, I just thought you were a bitch. Julia shrugs. But back then, that word made me frightened of everything I felt. Martha wants to remember saying it so she can take it back, but Julia's already moved on to another conversation. She goes to get a haircut, but her regular hairdresser isn't there. Martha gets advice she doesn't need from a guy who's tugging at her hair with a grimace. I don't get my hair cut often, so just a tidy up, she says. It's not really age appropriate, is it? He asks. I'm more into the European model of longer hair at any age. It's all rather schoolgirl. Martha wants to point out that what Michelle Pfeiffer and Julianne Moore and Monica Bellucci have in common is a non-sexist and ageist hairdresser, and that she's sick of adding to the list what people her age can't wear anymore or do anymore or be anymore. But she doesn't, except she gets a sense that he's going to do whatever he wants with her hair, so she puts up a hand to stop him, stands up, takes off her cape and walks out. Teresa ends up trimming it, and the capable hands kneading her scalp make Martha cry. She can't bear the idea of not living next to Teresa and Marco and their family, or Jennifer and Steve and the boys. She's lived in enough houses where neighbours seemed absent, hostile, cold, polite. She'll miss those conversations while she's dragging out the recycling bin, the ostentatious Christmas lights that bring people out of their houses for a stroll up and down the streets, of Teresa waving off Jennifer's apology for the noise made by her kids at night because, according to Teresa, when your sons get their pee plates in this area, who sleeps anyway? But spring has come, and there was no warning from Lottie this morning, just another text message from the agent, and this time Martha responds. Chapter 15. Jimmy's worlds collide in the bakery section at Coles in Leichhardt, while Toto's enjoying a ride in the trolley and Rosie's analysing use-by dates. Frankie's there, studying the ingredients of the pull-apart cheese and bacon bread, and for a moment he contemplates walking past, but she sees him, smiles with surprise at first, delight when she sees Toto, and then Rosie. Jimmy's supposed to introduce them. He knows that, but he doesn't. He's sure it's simple as, "Frankie, this is Rosie." But he doesn't say a word. "I'm Francesca," she says. "Rosie." He figures it's Italian instinct that has them kissing each other on both cheeks, coldly, politely. Frankie takes Toto's hand next. "Ciao, ciao, tesoro." And then she glances up at Jimmy. "I'll see you around." He got it wrong. Cold and polite wasn't meant for Rosie. It was meant for him. The dog food aisle proves to be worse than the bakery section. Rosie puts in the same ingredient analysis for Bruno as she does for them. "Are you embarrassed about being with me?" she finally asks. "No," he says. "No." He's angry that she even thinks it. "You didn't even introduce us. She had to do it." "I didn't know what to do." "Why?" "Because she's my best mate and I don't keep secrets. So being with me is a secret." He wants to say that being with her and Toto means everything to him, and that he knows that. But he spends a week away from them, and the loneliness eats away at him, as if he's been away a year. At netball, Rosie wants him to keep an eye on Toto while she's playing. They're surrounded by girls and women, thousands of them. Even Toto is fascinated, leaning forward in his pram, peering out at the world with a crease of confusion in his brow, as if he's already worked out that the opposite sex is strange and colourful and animated and loud. "When's your game?" he asks Rosie as they walk between a couple of courts. 2:30. "Then why are we here so early?" "Because Scarlett and Marley are playing." He's worked out that they're the children of a couple of the women, but doesn't need to be told in a tone that says, "Dickhead, how did you not know that?" And nothing intimidates Jimmy as much as Martha and those mothers watching the under-8s Dolphin team. Rosie's one of them. "Get in the circle, Marley." This Rosie is an alien that Jimmy and Toto haven't met before. "Shoot! Shoot, Scarlett!" Maybe that's Martha's voice, because Jimmy can't differentiate between them anymore. They belong to the animal kingdom of netball mothers and associates. Tears in most of their eyes when Marley gets a shot in, but Jimmy understands. Because the look on the kid's face when she looks over at both her mums is priceless. Mackie approaches with Annabelle and a girl named Fern, who's about 6 feet tall with a lot of braids and different team colours. They've just started going out together. Fern smiles when Annabelle tells Jimmy that, in a way that maybe Rosie would smile if Jimmy told everyone that they were sort of going out together, or sleeping together, after having a baby together. Fern has to ref a game, so Annabelle sticks around with Jimmy and Mackie, and then Alana joins them because her brother is one of Aunt Georgie's best friends. Jimmy likes being a netball bystander. When he's forced to watch a league game with Will or Mackie, they talk about the players and the ref and the odds and their footy tipping. But here, Jimmy's fascination for other people's lives is rewarded. Today he gets the inside story of the Annabelle and Fern dilemma. Fern's parents are in denial about her going out with a girl, whereas the Mackies are accepting. The problem, however, lies with the Mackies. Annabelle's fear of being told by her school that she can't take Fern to her Year 12 formal is surpassed by the fear that her parents will protest and make it a big deal. "But it's a big deal," Jimmy says. "But not theirs, ours," Annabelle says. Alana sees herself as an expert on the topic because she's a school principal and a lesbian. Her belief is that there'll be no directive from the principal of Annabelle's school about who to take to a school formal. And in the space of an under-8s netball game, Jimmy has a discussion about being teenage and lesbian, listening to Alana interrogate Tom about his teaching credentials, learning more about the family history of the Chairballs and the Finch Mackies, and accepts that he will never understand team sport. "I'm going to grab a couple of sausage rolls for the kids," Alana says. She tells Mackie to come along with her. "Which one's Toto's mum?" Annabelle asks Jimmy. Jimmy points. Yeah, that figures. Why? It just does. I like her hair. Where did you meet? In a flood? You? Here, Annabelle says. We played each other's teams on the first game of the season, and during a toss-up our eyes sort of met. That's pretty romantic. Yeah, so's meeting the mother of your child during a catastrophic event. The final whistle blows and Annabelle's on her feet. See you next week. And Jimmy hopes he does. Mackie returns with a sausage and a bread roll, looking relaxed and pleased with himself. I think I just got offered a job, he says. Jimmy decides to go see Frankie down at the Union during one of her breaks. It's like you didn't want us to meet, she says, putting a beer on a coaster in front of him and sitting down. As if I wouldn't be interested in meeting Toto's mother. Jimmy wants to channel Annabelle Mackie and tell everyone that he's going out with Rosie. I've been staying there at night. What does that mean? We're sleeping together. Is that a good idea? She asks. And he feels irritated by her expression, but feels vindicated because this is the exact reason he didn't introduce her to Rosie. In what way wouldn't it be a good idea? He asks. She's Toto's mother, so when you break up, it'll have big consequences, Jimmy. Why would you instantly think we'll break up? I've never got a sense you were interested in a relationship, so just make sure you don't feel forced into this one. She's not forcing me into anything. I didn't say she was, Frankie says. It's you who might be doing the forcing on yourself. They're interrupted by one of the bar staff who wants Frankie to sign off on something. Jimmy waits until the guy's out of earshot. I don't understand what you're getting at, Frankie. His tone is a lot more hostile than he intends. Are you interested in her because she's Toto's mum? Or is it something deeper? Frankie asks. Because you need to make sure you're not getting the two confused. Why are you getting aggro, Frankie? He can see the hurt in her expression, but he can't stop feeling pissed off at her. I'm not getting aggro, she says. You are. No, mate, you are. There's ice in her stare. Maybe I'll be shitty if you walk away from Toto. I would never walk away from him. You haven't been given a reason to walk away. Yet. A broken relationship would be a reason. You don't know that. Yeah, I do, she says. Because it's what you do, Jimmy. After your pop died, we didn't see you for a year. And then you came back and nicked off again. You're the one who told me to go looking for my mum, Frankie. Yes. And when that didn't work out, you kept on going and another 2 years went by and we didn't see you. But this isn't about us, Jimmy. It's about Toto. Because if things don't work out again, you can't go looking for yourself. Thank you for reducing my life to a cliche. He sculls his beer and stands up. I bet Mackie didn't get a lecture when he decided to bail out on us all those years ago. You weren't here, she says. So you have no idea how hard it was for Tom, and Tom has no idea how hard it was for you. You guys are so slack, and we do all the work. Siobhan lives on the other side of the fucking world and she checks in, and so does Justine. But you guys fall to pieces and don't give us another thought. Well, you can't do that when you've got a kid. That's a game changer. That's all I'm saying. She's crying now, and he feels like shit, but he's angry at the same time. My mother's depression screwed me up for such a long time, Jimmy, and it was out of control, but I'll never forget it. That little boy needs you no matter what. Jimmy has to get out of there, so he walks out without saying goodbye. He's got laundry to collect from Mackie and Tara's, so he heads over to Petersham. Tara's home, and if she's been given a Frankie update, she doesn't let on. Jimmy asks her for a bag to put his clean clothes in. She hands him a canvas one, and he heads outside to the laundry. Need help? She says, following him out. I don't appreciate someone telling me how to live my life, he says to her, because he's bursting with something to say. Fair enough. Or having an opinion on who I am and what I should be doing and what my responsibility is. And that's what Frankie did today, and she was out of line. I know how you feel, she says. I have the Mackies, and they're like that with Tom, so you have to make a choice. Accept it and be subject to it for the rest of your life, or walk away. Because you can't have the watered-down version of family, Jimmy. Not with Tom and Frankie. Chapter 16. She overhears Martha telling the netball women that her mother Lottie's voice wakes her up each morning. Everyone seems to have dead mother stories, except for Rosie. What she's sure about is that she's not going to wait for any gangster cancer to win. Decides to go for the blood test to work out if she's got the BRCA mutant gene. If this thing's coming after her, Rosie's going to get to it first. And because she doesn't want to ask Martha again or do it alone, she calls Yolanda. It's a blood test, Rosie tells her in the waiting room. Do you want me to go in with you? No, just sit out here with me and then we can go for a coffee and a muffin after. Too easy. Yolanda flicks through a magazine, shows Rosie a picture of some reality star in a bikini. Fake boobs, she says, but then realises what she said. Sorry I mentioned the boobs. Why? Mine aren't going anywhere. And then they're laughing. Yolanda takes Rosie's hand and gives it a squeeze and goes in with her after all. When she gets home, Jimmy's waiting on the doorstep and they go across the road to pick up Toto from Signora and then head back to the house. Upstairs, she runs a bath for Toto and figures she should tell Jimmy about the BRCA mutant thing because she doesn't want to be like Martha. Jimmy listens intently, nodding, and then she sees his eyes water. Don't be a fucking crybaby, Jimmy. I'm not, he mutters. He picks up Toto from where he's playing in his pen. I'll bathe him, he says. She lies on the bed and listens to their chattering. Toto's found the perfect companion because Jimmy can chat for hours once he loses his inhibitions. Where do you want to go? Jimmy asks when Toto's dressed in his trackies. Anywhere. What she almost says is anywhere with you and Toto. But she doesn't want to come across needy, especially since he didn't introduce her to his best friend. They put a hoodie on Toto because the weather's still unpredictable and head towards a bus stop. Jimmy takes her hand, like he always does when they cross the road. You're hurting me, she says, because he's squeezing so hard. He lets go, but she takes his hand again, and he presses his lips to it. They head into Chinatown for dinner and a stroll, because Rosie likes the colour in the crowd. And then, on the tram trip home, while Toto sleeps in his arms, they just pash the whole time. Back in the kitchen later that night, she grounds the beans for coffee, and Jimmy tells her that he's got an interview with the paramedics. Why didn't you say? She asks, setting the cafetiera on the stove. Toto has refused to settle down and he's banging at the laundry cupboard, where he knows his toys are. Jimmy doesn't respond and she looks over at him, wanting to see his expression. You're going for that interview, Jimmy, she says. Maybe. No maybes. The mines pay better than any other job I'll get with no qualifications, Rosie. You don't want to work for the mines. You want to be a paramedic. I just want to look after you and Toto. His phone rings. He looks surprised because it's after 10. Yes, this is him, he says, picking up Toto, who is clinging to his legs. Jimmy takes him out to the backyard. Rosie's curious about who's on the phone, but isn't sure how much of it's her business. Wonders if it's about his mother or his father. The coffee percolates, and she pours him a cup and gets him one of Signora's almond biscuits. By the time he's back inside, his cheeks are flushed with excitement. That was the cops in Rockhampton, he says. They found the frickin' Monaro. No way. Yeah, they picked up a guy just outside town for speeding and ran the plates. There's the sound of the front door opening. Rosie knows Martha won't go straight to her room because Jimmy's here. We're celebrating, Jimmy calls out. Toto gives her a matta shout, just in case they all forget his growing obsession with her. Bruno joins in the adoration, jumping all over her as if Rosie hasn't shown him affection for years. Martha joins him in the kitchen, puts down her handbag and takes off her jacket and shoes. You've gotten into the paramedics? She asks. No, they found my Monaro. Martha looks taken aback. You lost a Monaro? Stolen. Rosie thinks it's funny that Martha has the same reaction as she did. It's how I met Rosie. When Jimmy met Rosie with a Monaro thrown in, Martha says. Seb would have loved that. She points to the cafetiera for permission, but doesn't even wait for Rosie's response. My mum would have loved it, Rosie corrects. True. Jimmy's hyper and Rosie likes seeing him this way. He can't sit still, grabs his phone and begins to text. "Toto will love it," he says, crouching to hug him. "We're going to have to get a car seat, a proper one." He's up, hugging Rosie next, and his arms are trembling. Jimmy had never gone into how much the car meant to him. "I've spent the past 6 months totally avoiding Catherine Street," he says, "because I didn't want to bump into the guy who sold it to me. He would have been so cut knowing it was stolen." The microwave makes a ding sound at the same time the ding goes off in Rosie's head and Martha's. Their eyes meet. "Who sold it to you, Jimmy?" Martha says. "A guy with an accent." Rosie answers for him and she hurries to Martha's room where she knows there's a photo of her dad. Back in the kitchen, she shows it to Jimmy. This time it's her hand shaking. Jimmy studies it and Rosie can hardly breathe because it's all there in his expression. "You met Seb," Martha says, and the three of them can't find the words. "Dada," but Toto does. Jimmy crouches down again, holds him close, and Rosie can see that he's overcome. "My dad kept the car at work after my mum died," Rosie says. "Wouldn't sell it for years. I thought he was keeping it for me because it belonged to her." "Why would he go and sell it then?" Jimmy asks, and her eyes meet Martha's again. Rosie can't recall the exact words she spoke that day, but she remembers her rage. After that, she moved out with Luke, the deadbeat, and hardly saw her father for the rest of that year, rest of his life. She blamed Martha for that. "We had spent too much on legal fees," Martha finally says, "challenging the council to let us build upstairs. The irony was that we won, but we didn't have enough money to finish it." She points up the stairs. "That's what the Monaro paid for." Rosie in Toto's attic. She lies awake for most of the night. Tomorrow Jimmy's going to fly back to work, and in a week's time he'll hitch a ride to Rockhampton with one of his workmates and pick up the car. And it's at about 3 a.m. that Rosie knows she needs to travel back to Sydney with him and Toto in her mother's car. Sort of a pilgrimage. She shakes him awake. "Can you lend me money for a ticket to Rockhampton?" she asks. He turns to her and they're so close. She feels his breath on her face. "Are you and me together?" he asks. "Yes." "Then there's no talk about me lending you money again." Chapter 17. Martha sits out on the veranda. She hasn't had a moment's sleep and can't bear to deal with the breakfast trio in the kitchen. And what right does she have to take over a kitchen when she can't even cook? But she wants Seb's photo because it's still sitting on the butcher's trolley, because she doesn't trust memory anymore. For years it's painted a different picture of the past. Rosie's aggression and rage, Julia's antagonism, and Ewan. Now it's Martha who can't remember the song they supposedly danced to when they were in Year 10. Maybe there wasn't a song in the first place. Maybe Martha's one of those delusional people who invents hoops for those around her to jump through. And then Ewan's there, parking out front. And Martha's in destructive mode, knows she has to put a stop to those quirky sessions because what they're aiming for won't stand the test of time. "I don't think this is going to work," she says while they stand out on her veranda. He's been talking about a couple of job offers, but she hasn't taken in a word. "I probably should have told you this the first time we saw each other, except it's not exactly an opening line at a funeral. But my mother and grandmother and aunts died of breast cancer and I've been tested and I'm one of the mutants, and just before I met you, I worked out that I didn't want to live with the fear every 6 months that they'd find a lump, so I made a decision about what I was going to do." And Martha just keeps on talking and says words she's never spoken out loud before. Double mastectomy, and hysterectomy and reconstruction. Ewan is shaken, confused. "But you're not sick?" "No." He looks relieved. "So we'll deal with whatever you decide to do," he says. "No, I'll deal with it." He looks wounded. Add vulnerability to Ewan Healy's many traits. "I don't want us to start something and then it be over," she says. "We have started something, Martha. Why would it be over?" And then she sees his anger because the penny's dropped. "You're presuming I won't want to be around if you go ahead with it, he says. Martha wants to deny it because she didn't think he'd articulate it so quickly. I've never even seen them, he says. I actually told Alana that I thought maybe you were hiding something because every time we have sex it's in the car and most of your clothes stay on. You've spoken about not seeing my boobs with Alana? I talk about everything with Alana, even Bavaria. I just don't want the disappointment. Now she sees fury. Oh, fuck you, Martha. What right do you have to predict how much of a weak prick I'm going to be? And then he walks away.
This is the end of CD 5. The book continues on CD 6. CD 6.
Part 3. Going home. Chapter 18. Rosie looks tired when she walks off the plane, and Jimmy can't imagine sitting for a whole flight with Toto on her lap, including a sleepover in Brisbane being fun. Some guy beside her offers to carry her bag, and she lets him, adjusting Toto in her arms. When she reaches Jimmy, he takes her face in his hands and they kiss, with Toto squirming between them. But Jimmy doesn't want to stop because these days, a week away seems like forever. They pick up the Monaro at the Cops on Bolsover Street, and when she sees it, Rosie cries in a way Jimmy hasn't seen before. It hurts to watch, but he doesn't look away because he knows she's going to make tough decisions in her life, and he doesn't want to be the guy that looks away every time something breaks her heart. The car breaks her heart, because it's the most concrete reminder of her mother. The house isn't, because the rooms have been torn apart, walls have been knocked down, and so much has changed. But the car has stayed the same. Toto whimpers in his arms as though he knows. Mummy's just sad, Jimmy whispers to him. Rosie wants to drive, and they're on the Bruce Highway, heading to Brisbane. Toto's sleeping in the back, and for a while there's silence. But it doesn't make Jimmy feel lonely, and he senses the same for her. Later, he puts on a CD that Mackie's burnt for him, and while they're listening to a song by some band he's never heard of about belonging to you and belonging to me, Jimmy senses that nostalgia is planted. He knows they'll look back on this moment and remember it with great clarity, and when they see the A3 turn off, she glances at him, and they must see the same thing in each other's eyes, because she turns left instead of going straight, and Jimmy knows they won't be getting to Brisbane for a while. He remembers the first time he made this journey, driving the car through strange-sounding towns like Delulu, Wowan, Guvajan, Baralaba, before he met her, before the rest of his life happened. And it brings back memories of desperate loneliness and the suffocation Jimmy had felt, knowing he couldn't return home for another 2 years because of the good behaviour bond. But today, as they pass the town sign, he can't help feeling that it's a homecoming of some sort. Last time he was here, Jimmy got to stay long enough to be part of a community's healing. He can't say that the people here were the most resilient he had met, because he grew up in Waterloo and his housing commission neighbours were a pretty hardy bunch, but in this town they had taken care of each other when they needed to, and Jimmy had travelled through communities where that didn't happen, where there was plenty of blame and division. The sameness of this place is a comfort to him. The wide streets with no pavements, the Queenslander houses, the gold 4X sign on the top of the pub, the water tower dominating the skyline to the east. This was a place where Jimmy met Rosie, and he hopes it hasn't changed. Rosie wants to go to the hospital first, but Min's not there. Drinks in town, the nurse tells them. Jimmy and Rosie don't recognise her, and they ended up knowing most of the medical staff back then in some capacity, so she must be new. Jimmy thinks of drinks in town the night before the floods. How Kev got up there to warn everyone about the flood. Jimmy had been bone-tired from sandbagging and was about to head up to his room when he first saw Rosie. Thought she was so fucking gorgeous in a sad way. Spent about an hour watching her without doing anything about it, because he never thought he stood a chance, except a voice in his head challenged that. Outside the hospital, he takes Toto from her. "Let's walk," he says, because there's something special about a town on the Dawson at sunset when the breeze is close to perfect and the sky is sort of another world. The only change in the pub is the carpet, but the stench of beer soaked into its foundation smells the same. Kev's making a speech again because Mick, the butcher, who Jimmy worked alongside during the floods, is also an amateur photographer and is having an exhibition of some sort. Min is sitting at a table with a couple of other women, drinking a beer and eating scones that are doing the rounds. She glances up and it takes a moment to register, but then as they make their way towards her, surprise turns into joy and she shakes her head in wonder, her arms held out for Toto, who holds out his own, as if he's known her in some other life. "Have we got ourselves a flood baby here?" Min asks him. Toto's loving the attention after being cooped up in the car, and Min embraces the three of them as if they mean something to her, and Jimmy knows he'll spend a lifetime collecting people who make them feel that way. "I dream of you," she says to Rosie, almost in disbelief. "Ask Kev. I'll wake up and say, I dreamt of that Rosie again." They sit and talk for a while, surrounded by mixed photos of flood, of drought, of getting on with life. "People down south think you get over it as soon as the floodwater goes down, but it took us so long," Min says. "But at least we didn't get it as bad as those poor bastards in the Lockyer Valley this year," Kev says. "I was hoping you weren't down that way." "Nah," Jimmy says, "just up north when Yazzie came through." "How long are you staying?" Min asks. Jimmy looks at Rosie and they both shrug. "I'm off for 10 days, so we're going to take our time getting back to Sydney," he says. "Miss Fricker?" Rosie asks. "Is she still alive?" "That one will outlive us all, doll." Jimmy tracks down Mick, who's playing pool, and buys him a beer to toast his work. "Got a bit blue after, eh?" Mick tells him while they're sitting at the bar drinking. "Not just because of the deaths, but," he shrugs, "sort of gives you purpose when you're working and helping out. And then everyone gets on with their lives and it's as if you don't know who you are anymore." Rosie approaches with Toto and Jimmy reintroduces them. "Do you remember Mick? He drove the truck when we came to get you from Miss Fricker's place." Mick's eyes light up. "Thought I knew your face." "You saw me for 5 minutes and you remember my face?" Rosie asks. "I'm flattered." Mick stumbles to his feet. "Come with me," he says, with an urgency they don't understand. But they follow him to the back wall where his photos are on display. He searches and then points up high, grabs a chair to stand on and removes the photo, handing it down to Rosie, and Jimmy sees her eyes well up. "You're lovely," she says to Mick. "Thank you." And she holds out the photo. It's of Jimmy in his jocks carrying Joy Fricker through floodwaters, and Rosie's right behind them, staring up at Jimmy. The look in her eyes promises the world. "This is us before you were born, Toto," he says, showing their son. Later, after Min's taken Rosie and Toto to Miss Fricker's, Jimmy sits out back on the veranda with Kev and Mick. "Your name came up last week when the paramedics rang me for a reference," Kev says. "I'm not going to take it," Jimmy says. "I can't support them on a 3-year traineeship." "Where are you living?" Kev asks. Where is Jimmy living? On a couch, or in her bed, or in a mining camp? He knows he has to get a place for the 3 of them, especially if Dalhousie Street gets sold at auction in early November. "In Sydney," he says. "Bloody expensive in Sydney, eh?" Mick says. "Move up here, Jim. It's closer to the mines and you can rent for next to nothing." "Don't listen to him," Kev says. "You'll end up losing your kids to the big towns." In the room above the pub, Toto's sleeping beside Rosie. Jimmy watches him a while, wonders how this golden-skinned, gorgeous being could have come from him. He strips and gets into bed, gathering them both closer. She turns to face him. "You smell like a brewery." "Had to keep up with them," he says with a laugh. "Honestly, I'd end up a drunk if I lived up here." She traces her finger over his mouth. "It took me a couple of months to work out Toto wasn't Luke's," she says. "He was so miserable, always sick, and then his smile just appeared one day, and I can't begin to explain what I felt when I recognised it. Even if I never saw you again, at least I could tell Toto good things about his dad. Jimmy doesn't know how to be a good dad. He just wants to be a decent human being. The light from the street lamp outside illuminates the bedside table, and he sees the photo Mick took. "You want to get married?" he whispers into her ear. It takes her by surprise, but only for a moment. "Yeah, I do." And then she seems to think about it more. "Let's get married here." She looks down at Toto and brushes sweaty curls away from his eye, where we made something good for once in our lives. Talk of a wedding gets around by next afternoon. One of the farmers who owns a property outside town turns up at the pub and offers his paddock for a barbecue because Jimmy once helped rescue a couple of his prized cattle. Mick volunteers to take photos and pledges the sausages, and Maeve from the news agency wants to make the cake. "So does that mean Maeve's invited?" Jimmy asks Rosie. "Because I thought maybe it'd just be us and Mick and Kev and Min. And Miss Fricker." The members of the CWA bring them a hamper of local goodies, and Rosie invites them as well. And by the time the guest list hits 30, Jimmy knows that sooner or later he has to tell Frankie. After their last conversation, he doesn't know whether she'll understand, but he knows she'll never forgive him if she finds out from someone else, so he rings her. "I'm up north," he says. "They found the Monaro." Of course she'd know because she had texted Will. "We're getting married here," he says, waiting for the reaction. "What are you talking about?" "It's where things began with Toto," he says, "and this car being up this way and 1,000 other things. It means a lot to Rosie." "When is it? I'll be there." "Frankie, you're not going to fly to Rockhampton and drive 100 k's west." "Why not? Don't be ridiculous. Of course I am. Aren't I invited?" "As if I wouldn't invite you to my wedding." "Then why are we having this conversation? When is it?" "Saturday." "Are you kidding me?" "We're going to have to get the paperwork done in Sydney," he says. "Who knew you had to apply to get married? But the Catholic priest comes in once a month, and I have to get back to work in about a week, so it's this Saturday." "How the hell are you going to organise a wedding in 5 days?" "There's not much to organise, really. We're having a sausage sizzle in a paddock. Give me a list of things to do." He speaks to Martha next because despite everything that's gone on between her and Rosie, Jimmy thinks she should know. There's silence at the other end of the line. "Martha, I know it's a lot to ask, but if you'd like to come along." Is that what she wants? "I know she'd want you to be there." "Did she tell you that?" "She doesn't have to." In the end, Jimmy can't convince Martha that Rosie would want her there, but she agrees to pack a few things for Frankie to pick up, including Loredana's wedding dress. 4 days later, he drives to Quilpie Airport to pick up Frankie, who's come with an entourage. Not only are Mackie and Tara there, but Justine as well, grinning from ear to ear with that same infectious energy she had back in school. She links her arm with his as they follow the others. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," she says. "What? Me getting married?" "No, you being happy, Jimmy." "We've been practicing one song," Frankie tells him. "So if you've already got a wedding band, tell them we want 10 minutes on stage. Sausage sizzle in a paddock, Radio 1, that's our entertainment." "Where's the luggage conveyor belt?" Justine asks. Quilpie Airport is a one-room affair. Check-in, arrivals and departures all in the same place. Jimmy points to the ute that's just driven up, packed with luggage. "This isn't fucking Melbourne, Justine," Tara says. Justine laughs, obviously in on the joke, while Mackie and Frankie head towards the luggage ute and start collecting what's theirs. "By the way, I forgot to ask if it's okay if I bring a +1. Frankie calls out, dragging a suitcase off the trailer. "Me too," Justine says. Tara hugs Jimmy's arm. All 3 girls are giddy and Jimmy's confused. "Who are their +1s?" he calls out to Mackie, because he's not going to get anything from the girls. Mackie points. "Them." Jimmy looks to see Will and Siobhan standing near the exit. You're getting married, Siobhan says, leaping onto him. Will looks heavily jet-lagged and wants to know where the Monaro is. Can't believe you lost it for 2 years, Hayla. Stolen, Jimmy corrects. You look like crap, mate. Will and I have been travelling for 36 hours, Siobhan says. 36. We met these two at Vegas airport, Tara explained. They haven't even gone home to see their families. Jimmy embraces the two. You came all the way here for me? As if he did, Siobhan says. He came all the way to make sure everything's okay with Frankie. I told you that in confidence, Siobhan, Will says, irritated. You told me that because we've been stuck together for 36 hours, Will. She's got an audience in a local family who are fascinated by the arrival of very loud, dramatic foreigners. He thinks he stuffed up by taking the Stuttgart job, not reading the signs and wallowing in self-pity instead of coming back and making things right. Siobhan looks at Will. Did I leave anything out? I've got a good memory for a reluctant male crying. Will mutters something under his breath and walks away to help Frankie, who's now on the Utes tray, helping to offload the luggage. Siobhan points to her cheeks, mouths a word, tears. They arrive at the pub and Will goes off to organise a couple more rooms down at the motel. Mackie and Tara are still to arrive because they had to hitch a ride with a local. The girls, meanwhile, have taken over the main bar with their luggage. What does one wear to a country wedding? Siobhan says, holding up 2 outfits. Sausage sizzle, Jimmy reminds them. There's a sound of footsteps on the stairs and Siobhan looks up. Oh my God, I'm going to cry, she says. That's him, isn't it? Rosie is coming down the stairs with Toto on her hip, staring at the invasion of frills and tulle on the ground. Jimmy figures it's her mother's wedding dress spilling out of Frankie's luggage. Siobhan is advancing on Rosie and Toto with arms open. I just want to eat him. Jimmy removes Toto out of the impending fray and introduces Rosie. She doesn't say much, but crouches down beside the wedding dress. When she holds it up, there's a gasp among the others, and then silence. I'm presuming we've got a circa late 80s, early 90s gown here, Frankie says. It's pretty awful, Rosie says. Frankie and Jimmy politely agree. Let's hit the shops, Siobhan says. Shop, Rosie says. That's what I'm saying, Siobhan shouts. Let's go shopping. There's one shop in town, Jimmy tries to explain. Frankie is searching for something amongst the tulle of the dress. Before I forget, she finds a pocket and unzips it. Your stepmom, just Martha, Rosie says. Martha said to tell you that when she sent the dress for dry cleaning, she found these in the pocket. Frankie holds out 2 rings, plain gold. Rosie stares at them. Are they your mum and dad's? Jimmy asks. Rosie nods, takes them from Frankie, clenches them in her fist. I can fix the dress, Frankie says. Pull it in a bit, cut it at the knee, get rid of the puff sleeves. Rosie doesn't respond. Jimmy tried to explain to them on the drive from Quilpie how Rosie was feeling at the moment, raw, because her parents aren't around for her wedding. Hopes they understand her mood. Will walks in, holding a couple of keys, and Frankie does the introductions. Rosie's dad sold Jimmy the Monaro, Frankie tells him. No way. Jimmy nods. He can see it's too much for Will's pragmatic mind. Go sleep off the jet lag, babe, Frankie says to him. It'll make better sense when you're awake. Will goes to leave but turns back to Rosie. I was with Jimmy when he bought it, you know, he says. They seem to be magical words for Rosie. You met my dad, Will nods. When we walked into the workshop, he didn't know who was interested in the car, but I got a sense that if it were me, he wouldn't have sold it. Will has to think about it. Your dad just took a liking to this one, he says, pointing in Jimmy's direction. And then Jimmy tells him that he needs a car because he's looking for his family, and that was it. Will looks at them both. Pretty big coincidence, he says. Later that night, while Rosie and Toto are staying at Min's, Jimmy and the others end up in a meadow lying on the grass, staring up at the stars. Best night sky I've ever seen, Justine says. I've seen the northern lights in Norway, Siobhan says. Frankie sits up from where she's lying beside Will, who is still half asleep. We don't want to steal anyone's thunder, so don't even say congratulations until we land in Sydney, Frankie says, but we did this on the plane. She holds up a hand that has a ring on it. Can't we? Tara begins. No, Frankie interrupts. And stop crying, Justine. Are you at least having an engagement party? Jimmy asks. Will opens an eye. We're going to find the closest paddock in Campbelltown and have a sausage sizzle. He gives up on sleeping and sits up next to her. Once we get married, Frankie's dad's going to renovate the double garage in my parents' backyard, he says. Turn it into a granny flat. That's practical, Tara says. Yes, because people who get engaged in seat 10B and 10C on a Rex flight to Cupid are pragmatic about such things, Siobhan says. Very challenging, Frankie says. I'm going to have to wash my hair in 7 minutes because of the water tank. Mackie is looking unimpressed by the news. Justine in Melbourne, Siobhan in London, Frankie in fucking Oatley, he laments. Tom, it's a 20-minute drive from your house and it's on the train line, Frankie points out. Guys, we're going to be 30 years old before we know it, Siobhan says. In 5 years' time, mate. I'm already counting it down. Jimmy's got a baby, and these guys are talking granny flats, and do I need to confess that now I holiday with my father? My father! My parents get a divorce from their toxic marriage, and I start enjoying the company of the middle-aged. She shakes her head with disbelief. Our fun days are gone. As opposed to being in year 12 and watching Jimmy's nudie runs down Maroubra Beach, Tara says. And Siobhan flashing, Mackie says. Remember, we'd be like, not again, Siobhan, put him away, we're begging you. You're a dick, Tom, she says. But they're all laughing, and it's what they do all night. Talk and drink and laugh because Jimmy figures it's the last time they'll be together again for a while. So, now for the wedding presents, Justine says. No presents, Jimmy says. We don't have room in the car anyway. These won't take up room, Justine says. You've got 3 days to get to Byron because we've booked you into a 5-star resort there. And my parents bought you a suit for Saturday, Frankie says. And my parents are covering the drinks bill, Mackie says. Too much, Jimmy says. You being here is enough. And they toast to them being together. Speech, Jimmy, Tara says, because I bet you won't do one at the sausage sizzle. Jimmy's never made a speech in his life. Go on, Frankie says. He doesn't know where to start except for the truth. After I found my mum, it sort of fucked me up a bit, he says. And I'm driving for days and days on the Bruce Highway and it's just me in my head and the trees. And for a moment, I tell myself to drive straight into one. And I know you guys want to be enough to have stopped me, but at the time I didn't have space in my head to think of anyone. And then in a split second I get an image of the guy who sold me the car. And I knew I couldn't wreck something he seemed to love so much. And that was it. The moment was gone. And a week later I met Rosie. None of them speak. And Jimmy doesn't know what to say. He catches Mackie's eye. Best man? Shit, yeah. Jimmy's wedding day is literally the best day of his life. He hasn't had many of those, so he's able to differentiate. After the barbecue is lit, he holds Rosie's hand and they watch it all in silence. And like always, Jimmy is amazed by the kindness of strangers, by the coincidences in life, by how much his friends love his son, by Miss Fricker's sullen tenderness towards Rosie, matched by her total hostility for Jimmy and Toto. Min joins them, holding a muddy Toto. How about Kev and I take this one home with us tonight? She says. We've got a cot set up for my daughter's little one in the rumpus room. Jimmy likes a world where Min and Kev are in charge and feels safe. Any advice, Min? He asks. She thinks for a moment. Easy. The kids always come first. Frankie, Mackie and Justine put together their version of Toto's Rosanna, a sort of ballad for the bridal waltz. And although there's not really a dance floor on the paddock, Jimmy takes Rosie in his arms. You look great in that dress, he says. You look great in that suit. It's the best thing I've ever worn, he says. You? She thinks about it, holds up a hand with her mother's wedding ring. This is the best thing I've ever worn. Tara and Mackie fly out the next day to visit his nan Agnes in Brisbane. Jimmy drives them back to Quilpie, doesn't know how to thank them for letting him stay in their home, but he knows he'll find a way. Can I ask you something personal? He says, just as they're about to board. Depends on how personal, Tara asks, suspicious. When you do that whispery thing to each other in the morning, before you go your separate ways, what do you say? They exchange a look and laugh. Should I pick up a couple of chops for dinner, Petal? Mackie asks her. 1,000 times yes, Tara says. Was I a dick last night, Poppet? 1,000 times yes. Can you make sure our health insurance premiums are up to date, honey bunny? 1,000 times yes. The boarding gate opens and people start filing past them. Nothing deep, Tara says, giving Jimmy a hug. Just a personal joke from before we were going out. Jimmy thinks it's profound enough. See you in fucking Sydney, she says. Chapter 19. At 5:47 p.m, when the sun is meant to set, Martha waits patiently for the solar lights to switch on. They're placed along the path that leads to the vegetable patch, exactly where Seb meant them to be. She lies back on the banana chair and waits some more, but they don't come on. Fuck you, Seb. Fuck you. She hears the back door open behind her, and Rosie is standing there, home from the Monaro retrieval and from the wedding. Martha would love to point out that girls who look 12 years old shouldn't be getting married, but she already knows the response to that one. What would you know, Martha? When she gives up on the solar lights, she heads back inside to where Rosie's warming up Tot's milk bottle. Thanks for finding the rings, Rosie says. Martha doesn't respond. Her job application is spread out all over the butcher's trolley, so she shuffles it together, placing it into a plastic sleeve. Am I presuming a congratulations isn't on the cards? Rosie says, arms folded, slap-worthy expression on her face. Congratulations, Rosie. I'm so happy for you. Really, Martha? Yes, really. How about we have some people over to celebrate the nuptials? Rosie looks surprised and then suspicious. The what? Martha starts taking her own suggestion seriously. She grabs a notepad off the fridge and starts writing names. Everyone who knows you will want to toast the bride. I don't know that many people. What about the neighbours and those girls from your mother's group? It's not a mother's group, whatever it's called these days. Rosie's suspicion hasn't eased. The microwave pings while Martha's scribbling down names and ignoring the scrutiny. Marco, Teresa, Signora De Lorenzo, a mother's group times 2. The names will come to Martha soon, those capable young women who sit in judgment of Martha and the others. Rosie walks over to examine the list. What about Ewan and Julia? Martha finds herself in an arms-folded Rosie pose. You hardly know them. I belong to the netball team, Martha. Ewan trains us, plus I take care of their father, so we chat sometimes. You and Julia chat. What of it? I'm not inviting Ewan and Julia. Why not? He's your boyfriend, isn't he? If I do, Alana will come along, and then Sophie and Elizabeth will get offended. Invite them all then. It's not as if you're throwing this party for me. I'm throwing it for all 3 of you. Bullshit. This is your way of having a house unwarming. It'd be nice if you just admitted it. Well, it would have been nice to attend your wedding, Rosie, but it looks like no one's getting what they want these days. As if you needed to be asked. Of course I needed to be asked. Jimmy asked you. No offense to the lovely Jimmy, but I would have preferred that it came from you. I didn't think it'd be such a big deal, Martha. Lottie is telling Martha to bite her tongue because it's loaded with something she'll regret saying. She scribbles down Ewan and Julia's names, shows Rosie. Happy now? The doorbell rings and it's Ash from the real estate agency, who beat 4 others because of less bullshitting and a touch of warmth. Martha takes her out to the backyard, wondering if the solar lights are going to make an appearance. When they don't, she turns on the floodlights instead. It looks amazing, Martha. Rosie is watching them from the kitchen the whole time. And once they're back inside, Martha puts on the kettle. Rosie, this is Ash. We're going over the contract if you'd like to join us. Rosie doesn't respond, and Martha leads the agent to the front living room, where they sit down on the three-seater. Martha skims through the advertising plan, shaking her head. I'm not interested in redecorating. You've got a better chance of attracting buyers, Ash tells her. What part of this house, this street, this suburb that won't attract buyers? If you play your cards right, Martha, you can get over the $1 million mark. It's pretty amazing for a place that used to be a dump. So obviously Seb looked past the decorating last time it was on the market. Martha can tell that Ash is choosing her words wisely. All I'm saying, Martha, is that we want to attract a certain type of buyer. Someone not like my father. Ash looks over to where Rosie is leaning against the door. No, not like your father at all, she says. You don't need someone with vision and a dream to buy this house, just someone with money. The party list goes from 6 people to 25. Feeding a large number of people is not something Martha's ever quite accomplished in her life, but she refuses to let on to Rosie that she's out of her depth. She goes next door to Teresa, who's happy to take over. I'll get Signora to help and we can make a tray of lasagna and cotolette. So where do we start? Martha asks. Go by what's needed and leave it to us. I can help with the cooking. No, you can't, Bella, Teresa says diplomatically. How about German potato salad? Teresa seems to pretend that Martha hasn't spoken. And I'll make the tiramisu, and I know that Signora will make the crostoli. Who's Martha to deprive the newlyweds of Signora De Lorenzo's crostoli? Marco comes home and Teresa tells him to check out Martha's solar lights. Have you had them out in the sun long enough? He asks as they head over to the house. 4 days. Maybe you should return them. I don't know where Seb bought them from. Marco looks taken aback. Seb brought them. When? 5 years ago. Marco laughs. Martha, I'll buy you new ones. She nods to fob him off because there's no way she's buying new lights. If Seb's don't work, she's finished with solar energy in her life. She decides to make it a mid-afternoon affair. And for the first time since Martha's lived in this house, she has guests over for a party. Rosie wears the dress Martha bought her, and Jimmy is looking smart in a skinny black suit. Both are effortlessly gorgeous, and Toto's resemblance to Seb throws Martha every time he bursts into her space, which is often. The guests all arrive at the same time, which makes things less awkward when Ewan arrives. She misses the banter and the chemistry between them, misses getting the texts, misses their intimacy. Martha spends the afternoon floating around, refilling glasses and listening to snippets of conversations. Either Yolanda or Tessa's partner is having a conversation with Marco about water conservation because he's a country boy, and he reckons that water distribution is all they talk about where he's from. Jimmy's outside being grilled by Sophie and Elizabeth. No, I'm putting that off for now, he says. Sticking to the mines. Where are you looking? Anywhere. We're budgeting for a 2-bedroom. Tempe's great, Sophie tells them, and you can still get a bargain in Dulwich Hill. We'll work it out, Jimmy says. Rosie doesn't want to lose any of her shifts, so it's best we stay in the area. You won't find anything in the area, dolls, Elizabeth says. It seems to be the question on everyone's lips because Rosie's having the same intense conversation with the girls. He's away every second week, plus they only fly him to the closest capital city, which is Brisbane, and from there he has to pay his own way to Sydney and back again. But he's still making more than if he was on a traineeship, Rosie, so the mines are a better option, practical Louise says. Mark and I are struggling on a single wage at the moment, Yolanda says. Who knows whether we'll stick it out until the end of the year. You said you were struggling back home, Yolanda, Rosie says. Martha can sense she doesn't want these girls leaving town. At least he's got a job here. But we have family around us, the aunties, the cousins, babysitters, Tess says. Teresa has excelled with the food and there's praise all around for the menu. I'm not the best of cooks, as my friends will tell you, Martha says as she pours Yolanda and Tess a glass of wine. My father says it's because she's German, Rosie says. What is? Martha asks politely. The fact that you can't cook, Martha. If that was said about the Italians, there'd be cries of racism. No one would say that about Italians, Rosie says. When was the last time you heard someone say, "What's your favourite German restaurant?" Una's, Alana volunteers, overhearing on her way to supervise the kids upstairs. How about we throw around the names of two world leaders, Rosie? Angela Merkel and Silvio Berlusconi. Wonder who I'd prefer leading my country. Rosie won't give Martha the satisfaction of laughing, but Martha knows she wants to. She can see Seb's quirk dancing on Rosie's lips. German Riesling, anyone? Martha asks, holding up the bottle. Later, Signora De Lorenzo approaches with Toto, who's feverish and miserable, and Rosie is about to take him upstairs, but Signora won't hear of it. There's a mini exchange of argument between them, but who can tell? Signora always looks like she's telling someone off, when all the while it could merely be a discussion about the weather. Walk them to Signora's, Rosie tells Jimmy, kissing Toto's cheek. And throughout it all, Martha's aware of Ewan, who sticks close to Julia and Alana and the kids. What she'd really like to do is walk over and ask if it's true if he's taken a job at a sporting clinic in the southwest. But he doesn't look at her, and she doesn't blame him, because she wishes she could have revealed how she was feeling without causing so much hurt and damage. Outside, it's getting dark, and Martha goes to check the solar lights, but there's nothing, except Sophie and Elizabeth sharing a cigarette. You two are a disgrace, Martha says. Can I just put something out there, Martha? Sophie asks. If you bring up Ewan, I'm going to find George and tell him you're smoking. She was the one who dobbed on us in second form when we smoked at your slumber party, Elizabeth tells Sophie. You always had blinders on when it came to St. Martha. It's about Rosie, Sophie says. Martha shakes her head. She doesn't want to speak about Rosie. Has it ever occurred to you that she didn't come back for the house? Sophie asks. That she knew they'd be safe with you? You've made her cry, Sophie, Elizabeth says. I just can't get my solar lights to work, Martha sobs. When she walks back inside, she's overwhelmed by the feeling that pretty much everyone she loves most in the world is enjoying themselves in the home that Seb built. That both of them did. All of them. Eugenia's money, Loredana in the early days before she got sick, Rosie as a kid. She watches Scarlett and Marley and Samuel playing with Lottie's old radio. Martha hopes they don't break the figurines next to it, but doesn't want to go over and be a party pooper. The kids get Ewan to help, and he shows them how the tuner works, because that generation has no concept of anything but a scanner. Suddenly music blasts clearly through the speaker. Lionel Richie's crooning 3 Times a Lady. Ewan looks up, stunned at first, and then catches Martha's eye, knows exactly where to find her, and she can't help smiling, laughing really. And while the others are oblivious because there's too much going on, they smile at each other across the room. And Martha's 15 years old again, in that school hall, dancing with him to this soppy song and thinking that this is the beginning of something big. It's late by the time everyone's gone home. Rosie and Jimmy come back from picking up Toto at Signora De Lorenzo's, and Jimmy heads upstairs with him, while Rosie prepares his bottle. Thanks, Martha, Jimmy says from halfway up. Martha forces a smile, doesn't respond. Most of the plates have been put in the dishwasher, but she picks up a stray glass or two and hovers around the sink, listening to the sounds she's become used to as part of Rosie's nightly rituals for Toto. There's probably a better way of saying this, Rosie, so you're going to have to forgive me for my bluntness, but I don't think you two are going to make it. Rosie's reaction is instant, a deer caught in headlights. This week's contentment gone. What planet do you kids live on that makes you think it's possible? Even with the money you'll get from us selling this place, you're still going to end up with mortgage repayments or Sydney rent prices or just trying to keep your heads above water. And then every second week you're on your own dealing with Toto, trying to get to work, trying to get him into daycare, spending more money, and then having to pay at least $600 a month flying Jimmy back and forward to Brisbane. It's like the universe is setting you both up for failure before you've even started. Rosie's bawling, that silent cry that makes her look so vulnerable. Because she's gone through this in her own head, Martha can tell. Jimmy can live on hope alone, but Rosie's never been one to romanticize a situation. You kids deserve better than that. Upstairs, Toto starts wailing. I don't think we should sell the house, Rosie. She says it. Maybe she's been wanting to say it forever, but was frightened to. But deep down, Martha knows that she owes Rosie a life in this house, owes it to herself. That way, you can go to uni and Jimmy can take the paramedics traineeship, and staying here will mean there's always someone around to look after Toto, whether it's one of us, or Teresa, or Signora, or the netballers, or Jimmy's friends. Jimmy comes down the stairs with a blubbering Toto. Rosie? He says. Just deal with him, Jimmy, Rosie says. He hesitates, sees her tears. Toto's crying becomes deafening. Up until now, Jimmy hasn't had to cope with a crying wife and a sick child. So Rosie follows him up the stairs. Martha finishes up in the kitchen and switches on her laptop. Finds a plethora of Sophie emails from last week, same as always. Chain letters about love, the sisterhood, friendship, aging. She's about to delete them all, but doesn't. Sends an email instead. From justmartha@me.com. Subject: You are one of the loves of my life. Dear Sophie, before you go into a panic, I'm not suicidal or contemplating a big sea change, but you are one of the loves of my life and I wanted you to know. Love, Martha. She realises too late that she sent it to Alana, Julia and Elizabeth as well. So she just keeps on writing. From justmartha@me.com. Subject: I'm sorry for calling you a dyke in first form. Dear Julia, I'm sorry for calling you a dyke in first form. It was probably my only retaliation against you beating me in the maths prize, although I blame Sister Mo for that. Love, Martha. And it's as if she can't stop herself. From justmartha@me.com. Subject: Sorry for dobbing on you for smoking at Sophie's birthday party. Dear Elizabeth, what a little whistleblower in the making I was back then, all this time. Halfway through it, she hears the sound of an email arriving. From queenelizabeth3@gmail.com. Dear Martha, I'm responding before anyone decides to drag this into the wee hours of the morning and none of us get any sleep. So, 3 things. 1, we love you. 2, we think that Ewan, the loser who dumped me at our school formal, is the best you're going to get at your age, so stop fucking around. 3, get a bloody job. You've got too much time on your hands. Love, Elizabeth. Chapter 20. After she puts Toto to bed and talks to Jimmy about the life she wants, Rosie comes down the stairs that Jimmy's Monaro money made. The Monaro her mother drove. The one her dad promised would lead Jimmy to his family. The one that led him to her and her to Toto. From the kitchen, she can see Martha sitting in the dark outside on one of the banana chairs. Do you want a cup of tea, Martha? She asks from the French doors. I'd love one, Martha says. Moments later, Rosie hands the tea to Martha and sits down on the banana chair beside her, and the solar lights come on.
Belinda and Penguin Random House hope you enjoyed the reading of
The Place on Dalhousie. Written by Melina Marchetta, narrated by Maria Angelico.
Production Copyright 2019 by Penguin Random House Australia. All rights reserved.